Hello, we are live on a Thursday. And I'm here at the world map as usual. All right, guys, I'm doing something a little different that I don't normally do this during the streams. Usually I just load up Skypark and fly a few routes, focusing on, something like grass strip landings or using the NXi or, using VORs or something like that. But I wanted to kind of do a dry run in a way of like a quick start style video for people that are new to flight simming in general. Because I read Reddit a lot, I read the Microsoft Flight Sim forums a lot, I look at the Flight Sim Discord a lot, where there are, thousands of people talking about flying and needing help flying. So I thought I would do a stream where I just start way back at the basics and potentially embarrass myself not knowing some of the fundamentals that I take for granted, and just do kind of a short flight from scratch, starting at the main menu, starting at parking. We're going to start at Santa Monica today. So the code there is KSMO. And then we're going to fly just up the coast to Santa Barbara. And that's in California. So we're going to do that. We'll also take a detour out to an island. We'll go south to the Catalina Islands, which is south of Santa Monica in the Pacific, just off the coast there. And then we'll make a detour around there to show you how you can choose different landmarks or places you want to fly by to easily get them in your flight plan. And I'm not going to skimp on anything because I don't want anyone to not know something they are desperately trying to learn the basics of, like Autopilot, for example. I'm hoping that by the end of this video, if I do a decent job, then someone that's just simming for like the first time and they've done the tutorials that are built into the sim, and they're basically like in that awkward stage of, oh, now I'm on my own. I don't really have a goal in mind. What do I do? I guess I'll fly to this place I know. I guess I'll fly, near my hometown or near some landmarks. So I thought I would do something like this to try to get them there, try to make it so your chance of success from takeoff to landing is higher, and you can kind of get an idea of some of the capabilities in these planes. Especially with Autopilot and the cool avionics that are in them. So, hey Jake, how's it going? Hey Norm, welcome back. And I know for a lot of you guys that watch the stream regularly, this is probably not super interesting, but I think there are a lot of beginners out there that need this kind of help and kind of like a one-stop video to review. So I thought I'd give this a shot and see how it goes. And I'll try to be platform agnostic here. I'm on a PC. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are on Xboxes nowadays, especially, some people may already have an Xbox. Some people may not be able to build a PC right now. So yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone can, I'll try to not talk in terms of clicking and controls. It may differ if you're on an Xbox, so I apologize for that. All right. So the first thing is if you're brand new and you've never done anything outside of the tutorials, this world map here in the top right is pretty much where you will start almost every time you're in the sim, unless you want to do one of these predetermined flights or bush trips or landing challenges. You go to the world map to plan everything. Any custom flight you're going to do it all starts right here. And so the first thing we're going to do is pick our plane. We do that in the top left here. And you can fly whichever plane you want. The stuff that I'm going to do in this stream is can translate to almost all of the planes, but I definitely recommend starting with a smaller plane, starting with a Cessna or a Diamond, a single engine, just to simplify things. I'm a big fan of the DA40, just because there are less controls. It's a kind of more modern plane, and it doesn't have certain controls like a mixture or a propeller speed. It's literally just has one lever in it, which is our throttle, and that's all we need to use for the flight. Sorry, let me turn the music down. But you can fly the Cessna 172 is a great option as well. And if you have like the Cirrus SR22, that's a decent option too. But any small plane, I would recommend starting with, so you don't hop into an airliner and then are confused by the 10 billion buttons you have to hit on the flight computer alone to fly those things. And everything comes at you faster in a faster plane, so it's better to fly something slower to start. And once you pick the plane, The DA40NG, this is available in all of the editions of the sim, so everyone should have this available. And then once you choose the plane from the aircraft selection menu here, you can go to liveries, and this is basically the skin or the look and feel of the plane. So you can choose one of these. If you don't have all these available, you can go to your content manager, which is under your profile, and download them. So here, I'll just choose this Kenmore livery. Then here, the third section, you can go to weight and balance. I'm just gonna turn our fuel here to maximum, so we don't have to worry about running out of fuel. It's a short flight, but I'm not gonna really cover switching tanks, which is something we have to do in the Diamond. We're just gonna, maybe I will cover it, but we're just gonna make sure we have enough fuel for the flight. I'm just gonna go to max fuel. And then down here under customization, this is where you can set your tail number, which will show up on the outside of your plane. So there is a bug where when you enter a tail number, it doesn't show it here from session to session. But I'll just put mine in again. And if you fly in the United States, the tail numbers here start with N or November and are usually 6 letters total, 6 characters. So anyway, you can put in whatever you want. And then once you do that, then you're set for the plane. Up here in the top right under flight conditions, this is where you can set multiplayer options, the air traffic options. This is non-multiplayer traffic, so live real world traffic or AI, artificial intelligence, like fake air traffic. I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm going to set multiplayer to all players. And so this means anybody playing on the US West server will show up if they're near me, if they're at Santa Monica or on this flight. And then weather and time, I usually like to leave it on live, but it's getting darker nowadays. So what I'm going to do is exit this menu by clicking the top right here and actually just use this little time slider in the bottom left. And I'm just going to bring this over to the next day just so I make sure we're in daylight the whole time. All right, so now that that's set up, if you've never used the world map, you can move this around. I'm using mouse since I'm on a PC, so I can click to move this around. I can zoom in and out by using my mouse wheel. And that's just how you can zoom around and look visually at everything. So today we're gonna fly from Santa Monica, which is down here in the LA area, up to Santa Barbara, which is up here on the coast. So you don't have to zoom in to choose your departure and arrival airport. Another way to do it is up here. So I'm going to do that by clicking the select departure airport and then typing in Santa Monica. So you have to type in the code of the airport. So for Santa Monica, that's KSMO, and then it'll show up here in the results. So you just click on it, and now it's set as our departure airport. Another way to do this is just to click on one of these airport icons. It look like this little target symbol, and then you could hit set as departure that way as well. So for Santa Barbara, I know it's just up the coast, so we'll just pan up the coast, and then Santa Barbara, I'll just click it and then click set as arrival. Or you could come up and do that in the dropdown. Hey, Jake. Jake says, we chatted a bit in the working title Discord. I recommended the VKB Gladiator flight stick. Yeah, I am using the TSA still. I did, because I went to Flight Sim Expo and they, I saw the honeycomb stick and throttle that they're gonna be releasing, so now I'm not sure what I want. But the TCA side stick isn't gonna work for me for now, so we'll see how it goes. All right, and yeah, since this is a stream, you guys that are in here, if you have any questions, just ask them as I'm going through, or if there's anything you want to call me out on that I'm not doing right, that's fine too. And then if you miss anything, like if you tune in halfway through or something, you can always rewind live and catch the things I did before. And there'll be a replay up afterwards. And so I'm also assuming that at this point, you've done the main tutorials. So here on the home screen, you go under flight training. There are these basic tutorials here. So these will give you the very basics to just using your controls. Why these are the most important thing is not so much for like the procedures like takeoff and all that. We can talk about all that, but it's really about getting familiar with the controls you have. Since me personally, I'm on PC, I have a mouse, a keyboard, a stick, a throttle. Someone else may only have a stick. They may not have rudder pedals. You may be on an Xbox. You may be on an Xbox with a mouse plugged in. So these are really great to go through just to get an idea of the basic controls mattering what peripherals you have. So if you haven't done these yet, I would recommend it because then you'll know where all the primary controls are. Hey, AJ, how's it going? Welcome. Hey, Bill. Especially since YouTube's completely incapable of notifying me of anything. Vanilla G1000 or NXi? I'm going to use the NXi because I think it's amazing and it's free and it's available in the marketplace for everyone. So yeah, let me go over that. So if you want to follow along with the NXi, you can do that. If you don't want to install the G1000 NXi, these are the avionics that are in the plane we're going to use. It's basically the two giant screens in front of us that we use for our instruments and for our autopilot and our map and all that. So anyway, you can use the stock one, but if you want to install the NXi, you can just go here to the marketplace and type in NXi. And then at the top here, you just need to make sure to filter for free, or you can hit all. It's the same thing. And then you'll find the NXi here and you can install it. So you can just go here. I have it installed already, but there'll be a download button right down here. You can hit download. That'll install it and then you'll be ready to go. If you ever want to remove it, you can go over to your content manager, which is under the profile section here. So if you hit profile, down here, content manager, and then you can find, these are all of your add-ons. So this includes planes, scenery, and other add-ons like the G1000 NXi. So you can search for the NXi here. Oops, NXi if I spell it right. And this is where you can delete it if you want to not use it anymore. But this is going to be the eventual default for all of the planes. So the current stock G1000 will eventually go away. This will be what everybody has ultimately. So it's a good idea to get used to it now. I think it's already in a place where it's good enough to use instead of the stock one. The stock G1000 has very few things that this one does not. So yeah, I recommend using the NXi. If you don't, this will still you'll still be able to follow along with everything we're doing, even if you don't use the NXi. Question since the last stream was about VORs. Is there an advantage to using them versus GPS? No, not really. It's just, because VORs came out first and they still exist in the real world, not every plane has GPS. So if you find you're in an airplane that only has the capability to navigate with VORs, then obviously you would use the VORs still. And then, yeah, if you have a plane that's using GPS, the VORs are a fallback. Or, if you're navigating specifically using VORs, like say you have an instruction to track a VOR outbound on a certain radial, you would still switch to use the VOR in that case. But yeah, primarily I use GPS. It's also a reason why I like using the RNAV approaches instead of ILS. A lot of the time it's less things to do. It just kind of works. Let me make sure my time is set here. There we go. All right, so if you guys want to follow along, I'm on the USA West server, and we're going to spawn in at Santa Monica. And we're just going to fly up the coast to Santa Barbara. So the first thing I want to show before we get in is how to do your own flight planning here. You can do this in the plane. It's just more complicated. So to keep this beginner friendly, you can actually do it here on the world map. And all you have to do is first you have to select your departure and your arrival airport first. And then the second thing that you want to do is any point that you click at, you can add to an en route waypoint. So you can add it between our departure and arrival airports. So for example, if we want to fly down here over Catalina Island, I can just click here. And if you're on Xbox or something, you'll need to use the mouse cursor, like the pointer using the sticks. And then I can just hit add. And now you can see that adds it to my flight plan. So what's good about doing it this way is it'll save us time from programming our flight plane in the autopilot. So this will transfer over into our flight plan in the game, and it'll also work with air traffic control, and it'll also use the VFR map. So yeah, Havner. So what Havner is talking about in chat is there is an issue with the NXi synchronizing with the simulator. Basically, it sounds silly, but synchronizing with what the simulator thinks your flight plan is. This is the only time at this point in time when I'm doing this stream today, or you're seeing this video in the future. Right now, if you make changes once you're in the plane, ATC won't know about it, And the flight plan that shows up in like your VFR map that's built into the sim also won't know about it. So this is kind of your one chance if you're using the NXi to define your flight plan. If you want to use air traffic control and if you want to use the in-game VFR map, which we'll take a look at once we're flying. All right, so you can continue doing this if you want to add more and more waypoints. So for example, if we want to fly out over the island and then we want to come back in towards the coast, so we're not just flying over open water forever, I can again click out here and hit add. Sometimes this is a little weird though. Okay, it worked this time. Sometimes it'll make a really weird route and there's not really a way to reorder the waypoints. So all I can suggest is if it takes you off in a really weird direction, just try removing the waypoints and re-adding them. See, like that. Like it can do some crazy stuff like this. So now I'll just remove the waypoint again and then just kind of add it in a slightly different spot. So if you're flying near some places that have some really interesting landmarks you want to fly by, say you're flying over, you want to fly over certain landmarks in New York City or anything like that, you can just click the points or you can click any of the landmarks that are actually shown. So like these landmark icons, for example. So here I could click this and add it to my flight plan as well. But if you want to just choose yourself based off the satellite images, you can just click anywhere and add that as a custom waypoint. And these will transfer over into our plane and into our Garmin avionics that are in it. So we'll be able to use our autopilot to fly this for us. And I do want to show you guys autopilot because it really makes it more approachable for, you know, and easy to get to your destination, you know. I'm not going to go over every single perfect, like real lifestyle, you know, aspect of flying today. This is all about just getting you off the ground, letting you get to where you want to go, and having a better chance at, you know, landing and finishing your flight, because it's pretty intimidating when you try to do this for the first time. So I want to show you all the little tips and tricks I use to doing this. And don't forget the altitude. Yeah, so you can also set your cruise altitude up here in the navigation log. So it'll take a guess at your altitude, but generally you can't trust this, is what I've found. You can set it yourself, but what's predetermined is something you can't really trust. 2500 should work fine for us. We're right along the coast, so we're right pretty much at sea level the whole time. We're not going across any high terrain or mountains or anything like that, so we'll be okay here. So I'll leave it at 2500, but if you did change your flight plan to fly, like say over the Rockies or something, or fly to Colorado or Salt Lake, and you go to the nav log, you'll notice that it still has a low altitude here. So you may want to go in here and change the altitude to something higher. I'm not going to go into how to calculate your cruise altitude or anything like that, but we can do that in the future. But for now, we're just going to fly along the coast and keep it at a low altitude here. And 2500 is a okay altitude. Usually you want to be higher, you know, like the higher you are, if something went wrong with your plane, you know, altitude means time. You have more time to react to things. If you have to glide because your engine is dead, you have more time to react. So it's safer, and it's kind of counterintuitive, you know, like it feels like the higher you are, the scarier it is. But the higher you are, the more room and time you have to fix anything that's going wrong, anything unplanned. So anyway, in this case, we'll keep it low. We want to sightsee. You know, a lot of people that play Microsoft Flight Sim specifically know it's beautiful. And so staying low to the ground is really fun in this sim. So I like to do that whenever I can. All right, so here we have those custom waypoints set, and this will be programmed into our flight plan within the plane for us automatically. And then I'll show you how to use Autopilot to actually do this flight. Actually kind of want to, I was going to add another one. I don't really want to be over the water too long. Let's see if I can add another one here. There we go. So we'll stay along the coast a bit, and you can zoom in further and further, and you know, wherever you're flying, whatever you're familiar with, pick little areas you want to go to, just add as many points as you want, and it'll be transferred into your flight plan. And most people probably start by loading into the runway. I'm not going to do that today because I want to show you how to load in at parking with the plane completely off if you want to do that. If you don't want to do that, you can, you know, skip ahead in the replay of this, or You can load in at the runway and wait or whatever, but generally I load in at parking and start the plane up myself. And I want to do that because I want to show you how to contact air traffic control, how to get taxi instructions, how to taxi to the runway that you're supposed to take off from, and all that. So we're going to do that as well. So to do that, up here, it'll pick the best runway for takeoff, and theoretically, it should be giving you a runway that is best to take off based on the current wind at that airport. Sometimes it doesn't do that, but for now, we're going to change this down to a parking spot. You can pick any of the parking spots that are available. Santa Monica is a relatively small airport, so you can see these ramp, GA. Ramp is just basically a parking spot. It's an area on the ground designated for a plane to be in. GA means general aviation, so, you know, we're not a jumbo jet or anything like that. We're gonna, and then there's a size here, small, medium, large. At this airport, they're just small and medium. So we're a small plane, we can go with a GA small. So I'm just gonna pick one of those. If you wanna start at a really specific spot and pick it, you can zoom all the way in like this to see every single individual parking location. So you can choose one this way as well by clicking on it and setting that as your departure. So I'm just gonna zoom out to make sure our flight plan is still good. Yep, so still looks good. So we're set here. So we have KSMO as our departure, KSBA as our arrival. You can see it's already selected a runway for us there, runway 25. And then we pick the parking spot, so we don't start on the runway with our engine started. And then again, I changed the time, so just so we're flying during the day. So I'm just making sure it's after sunrise. And then we'll just hit fly to load in to the ramp. Hey Steve, how's it going? You always forget to set your altitude to the world map. ATC tells you to climb to flight level 170 and then 172. Yep, that does happen. I hate flight control when you fly in a small Cessna. What do you normally fly, Brian? Awesome, Cash. You did your first solo cross country to Santa Barbara. That's awesome. Yeah, people always ask, but no, I'm not. I don't fly. I haven't taken a discovery flight. My partner, she flies. She got her private last year and she's working on her instrument. So I've flown with her just a couple times, but yeah, I don't fly myself. Maybe someday, we'll see how it goes. All right, and then as far as add-ons and stuff, in the description in the video below, I only really use one major add-on, which is just the trees. So you can see I have like autumn trees. It's one of my favorite add-ons. It is a payware add-on though, so people usually ask what add-ons I use. So that's really the only major one I use. And then the G1000 NXi, which is inside the plane, and you know that's free. Everybody can use that. If you want to get out to this kind of camera, up here in the top menu, you have camera controls. This one's called the showcase camera, also known as the drone camera. So you can use this to just fly around wherever you want, mid-flight or not. This is how people get really cool shots of their plane. You may have seen them posted on forums or things like that. And if you want to get that really cool shallow depth of field look, all you have to do is change this drone focus mode right here. So you can either use auto, and if you use auto, it'll just focus on what you're aimed at. So this is kind of just a fundamentals of photography thing. The closer I get to the thing I'm pointed at and it focuses on it, the blurrier the background will be. Or another thing you can do if you want, some people get these really blurry photos or screenshots. You can change this to manual focus, and then you have the drone focus here. So I can do that until it's sharp. So now the plane is sharp. Another thing in photography is if you back up and then take this zoom level slider and zoom in a lot, the more you zoom in, as well as the closer you are to the thing you're focusing on, the blurrier the background will be. So now I'll focus on the plane again, refocus here. And so now you can see how blurry the background is here. So if you ever want to get really cool screenshots like this is how you can do it. Play around with the manual mode, try increasing the zoom level, and that's how you get that really blurry background, that bokeh, the depth of field effect. And if I did that closer and closer to the plane, like all the way this close, focused, if I can even focus this close. There we go. And you can see the background is just extremely blurry. So yeah, play around with these things if you wanna do that. You can always hit the reset button up here to get back to the default view. And then I'll hit cockpit up here to get back into the cockpit. All right, so yeah, for cruise altitude, we have that set. We're just gonna do 2,500 feet, but that was in our flight plan. We can always set the autopilot to go to whatever altitude we want that our plane's capable of. So we'll do that as we learn the basics of autopilot on this flight as well. And then we started here at parking instead of on the runway. So in this case, when you start at parking, the plane is completely off, right? The engine's not on, no lights are on, the avionics. This is the Garmin G1000. This is completely off as well. So we have absolutely nothing turned on. So what we're gonna do is go into the settings first. And there's a couple settings I'm gonna have you turn on that'll make starting it up and taking off easier. So here, either hit like your start button or hit your escape key to get into your settings. Here, go under assistance options. And then here, under piloting, I'm going to turn on assisted checklist right here. Now you may have some of these on already. You may have some of them off, mattering what your preset is when you first started the game and it asked you what settings you wanted. I use mostly true to life settings, and then I'll customize a couple things. So assisted checklist is really useful because it'll make it just a breeze to start up the plane, and also it'll help us learn how to start up the plane ourselves if we want to. And then another thing I would do is under navigation aids right here, I would recommend turning on the taxi ribbon. This is good because when we talk to air traffic control, they're going to tell us which runway to taxi to take off. So what this will do is draw a big blue series of arrows on the ground, kind of like augmented reality style, and we'll be able to follow those to the runway, taking the correct taxiways to get out there. And then finally, the last thing I would do is check this setting right here called Takeoff Auto Rudder. Yours may already be on. I have mine off, and some of the things we'll talk about during takeoff are relevant if you have this setting off. So I'll go over both and let you know what I'm talking about when we get to the takeoff portion. But basically what this does is the rudder is used, especially during takeoff, to keep the plane aligned on the center line of the runway. So if you've ever tried to take off and you're like, why is the plane going off the runway? I can't keep it on the runway. I can't even take off. You could turn this setting on to help you with that. Or if you have it off, we'll learn how to use our right rudder pedal to stay on the runway as we do our takeoff. So I'm gonna leave that off. If you have trouble with that or you don't have rudder pedals, I would turn this on, especially if you do not have any rudder pedals or rudder control. Turn this on, because otherwise you're not going to be able to taxi. You're not going to be able to take off, at least consistently. And then hit apply at the bottom when you're done with those things. AJ says, I'm going to buy my friend's 172 with a G1000. Dude, that is awesome. Oh, you're loaded. Wow, that's awesome. I've still never touched a G1000 in real life, so yeah, I'm interested to someday. My partner, I mentioned she flies, and she's using a G500 right now, which I didn't even know about until she mentioned it. And it's basically a G1000 split down the middle into two screens. So you basically have these two screens in the size of one of these. So it's split down the middle, and you have your instruments on one side and your map on the other side. All right, so now we're gonna start the plane up. So go to the top menu, and there's this little checkbox right here called checklist. And mattering which plane you've chosen, the checklist will be more or less rounded out. Like you may only have a few lists like we do here in the Diamond. If you're flying the 172 or another plane, you may have 10 or 15 checklists here for all phases of the flight. But at the least, we have enough to start the engine. So what we're gonna do is use what we turned on in the options, which is the assisted checklist option. When that's turned on in the checklist menu here, you get these extra options. So let me turn the music down even more. Sorry if that's annoying you guys. So you get even more options here. You get this button called auto complete page. This one is the easiest to use, as it would say. If you hit this, your virtual co-pilot will take care of all of this for you. And your checklist, like in the 172, it may have 10 or 15 steps in it. So if you hit autocomplete page, the co-pilot will just automatically do everything for you. Another option is this evaluation mode. And if you want to learn how to do the checklist yourself, you can hit this evaluation mode. And what this will do is automatically move your camera for you, and it will read out the step verbally to you, and it'll also highlight the control you need to interact with. So if I hit evaluation right here, let me turn the music off so you can hear, probably just leave it off the rest of the stream. So you can hear, so if I hit evaluation.
Parking brake, set.
So it says parking brake set.
Idle. Electric master.
Power level idle. And see how it moved the camera each time? That's because those things are already done. So it's checked them off for us automatically because the parking brake is already set and the power level is already at idle. So it's stopped now on this one, electric master on, and it highlighted this key down here. So this is our electric master. So we need to turn this to the on position. So for me on PC, I have a mouse, so I can like click and move my mouse to do this. On Xbox, you're gonna have to point at it and I think hit the A button and then use the trigger. Another option, if you have a mouse, is to just point at it like this and use your mouse wheel. So I'm just gonna turn my mouse wheel, roll it up, and that'll switch it to on. And so now this checklist is complete. It says page complete at the bottom, and we can hit this shortcut up here at the top that says starting engine. That'll bring us to the next checklist. So this is the starting engine checklist, and we can do the same thing. I can hit evaluation, or if I want a shortcut, I can just click auto complete page, and it'll just do it for us. So it's turned our strobe light on. That's a flashing light to let people near the plane know that we're gonna start it up. Basically it lets them know that our battery is on and we're probably gonna start the engine up. And then here it waited for something to happen on our G1000 here, and then it started by turning the key down here. So it started up the engine for us. So now page complete, we can move on to the next list. And our last list for this plane is just the after starting engine. So I'm just gonna hit autocomplete page. I noticed that on the end here, the last thing it did is release the parking brake. And I don't want that to happen. So what I'm gonna do is put the parking brake back on because I don't wanna go anywhere yet. And that's actually, those are actually all the checklists for the DA40NG. So here, we're already done. If you have something else like the Cessna 172, it's gonna have more checklists that you can follow. So it'll have one that's like before taxi, taxiing, before takeoff, and then a takeoff checklist, and all of those. So you can really get in depth with those, mattering which plane you're flying. You can go through the checklist, you know, item by item and learn it over time. Even today, a lot of the time, I'll just pick a checklist, use autocomplete to get it started, because I like starting here at parking. I don't like starting on the runway. It's kind of rude to start on the runway, especially if you have multiplayer mode turned on. Someone's coming in for a landing and, you know, they're like, oh my God, there's a plane already on the runway. So, you know, just being a good multiplayer citizen here, so. All right, so that's started up now. So we're all started up and ready to go. The next thing I want to go over, and I've already turned on the taxi ribbon, and we talked about the rudder auto assist option as well. So what I want to do now is tune into what's called ATIS, and we're going to do this using the top menu here. So we're going to go up here to ATC. So we're going to use our radios, and we're going to listen to the current weather. And this is just something that you might want to learn how to do if you want to take it a little more realistically. And what we're going to do is listen to basically an automated weather report for the airport here at Santa Monica. So we can automatically tune into these different frequencies with our communication radio by using these buttons right here. So again, up here in the top menu, just hit this ATC button right here. That'll open up this window to give you all your ATC options. So what we want to do is use ATIS. So I'm going to click the Santa Monica ATIS, and this is an automated weather observation system. Actually, they come in a few different flavors or different variations. This one's in ATIS, not AWOS. You may see that as another one. But basically, in the sim, they'll all kind of be similar to you. ATIS will give us runway information as well. So it'll tell us which runway is in use at this airport. If it says AWOS, that's automated through like automatic weather reporting systems. It's not recorded by a human in the real world, but ATIS is. ATIS is something that in real life has a real human recording it. So anyway, we click this and then we'll just listen in. And it's going to give us information on the airport. It gives us the wind, visibility is 10 statute miles, clear skies, temperatures 20 degrees Celsius and 10 degree dew point. Altimeter 29907, runway 21 is in use, landing and departing runway 21. All All right, so we're good there. I'm just going to switch back to ground by clicking this first option right here. So it turns off. We switch back away from the weather info or the airport info. So the most critical things that it says there, we have clear skies, so we're not worried about the cloud layer. This is using live weather. We happen to have clear skies. If there were clouds, it would give us the levels of clouds that it has reported. So it would tell us above the ground how high the clouds are. So if it said few clouds at 1,000 feet, that means there are a few amount of clouds at 1,000 feet above the ground. And it would continue with other layers of clouds. And then in this case, it told us that runway 21 is the active runway. So that's based off of the weather. So if you don't know, when you take off and when you land a plane, you want to take off and land into the wind. And that's because the wind helps the plane stay up in the air, generate lift. It is the preferred way to take off and land. You don't want to land with a tailwind. You want to land facing into the wind. And that's just basically about, the principles of how flight works. The more air passing over the airplane generates more lift. That's what puts us in the air. So if the wind's facing our plane, that's helping generate lift and keeping us up in the air. So it makes it easier to come in for a landing. It makes it so we can come in more slowly and more controlled. So ideally, we have a headwind coming in for landing and during takeoff. So if you can think about going down the runway with no wind, then we'll be able to take off at a certain distance. We'll be building our speed, the speed of the air over our wings to take off. We have to get to a certain amount before we can take off. If there's an additional wind coming at us, then that's helping us. It's giving us that wind flow over our wings for free, and we can take off in less distance. So we want more wind coming at us during takeoff and landing. All right, so now what we're gonna do is get taxi permission. So we know runway 21 is active. We figured that out just by using ATIS, so that's the automated weather, and we know that 21 is in use. So how do we get to 21? Well, first of all, 21, the runway number itself, actually indicates the heading of the runway. So on our compass here, if you're familiar with a compass, it has 360 degrees. 21 is right here, right? It's mostly towards the south side, a little to the west of south. So here's 21. So that would be 210, 210 degrees out of 360. And the runway numbers correspond roughly to the magnetic direction which is on your compass, of that runway heading. So runway 21 is facing this way. We would be facing 21, heading 210 roughly, if we're lined up with runway 21. So that's what the runway heading numbers mean, or the runway numbers mean. So knowing that, if we look at our compass, 21 is aimed a little bit to our left of our nose, right? So it's aimed about this way. So here's the runway in front of us. If we're aiming this way, that means that the start of the runway is on the opposite side of that, over here. So if we're over here, we would be facing down the runway this direction, and we would be facing roughly at 210 on our heading there. So that's what the runway numbers mean. So if you later on will pick a runway for landing at Santa Barbara, and that runway number will give us a rough idea of the heading of the runway. So we'll know basically how to line up for the runway. All right, so what we're gonna do now is get our taxi permission from the controller here. So right down here, taxi to parking and fueling, and then we have all these taxi options right here. So the type of flight we're doing is called a VFR flight. Basically just means we're flying with our eyes. We're just saying like, hey, we're leaving from here and we're gonna fly to Santa Barbara. And how we get there is kind of up to us. We don't have a very specific flight plan. We have to stay at a certain altitude. We can ask air traffic control to warn us about traffic and things like that. But generally we're kind of just flying wherever we want for the most part. So they're not gonna be telling us like, to turn certain directions or anything like that. They just know that, we're heading from here in Santa Monica up to Santa Barbara, and that, we have a certain time that we expect to be in Santa Barbara. So what we have here is a bunch of options for our departure. We're just able to request how we want to leave the airport. So what I'm going to do is look at our map real quick, and I'm going to bring that up here in the top menu and hit this little map button over here that says VFR map. And this is a convenient way of looking at the map if you don't want to zoom in down to your screens down here on the G1000 and look at the map down here. So this is just a convenient way to bring up a map that you can move around. You can resize it. You can zoom in and out. So with a mouse, I can point, click and drag it to move it around. I can use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out like this. You can see the flight plan doesn't quite look right here. There might actually be, maybe there is a bug with the NXi. It doesn't have this first leg going south, but what we wanted to do is take off and go south to check out the Catalina Islands down here and then go back up to the north. So we know that we want to fly to the south. So what I can do in our taxi request is say that we want to taxi for departure to the south because we intend to go to the south as soon as we take off. So I'm going to go and bring back the ATC menu here. And I'm just going to hit this button that says request taxi for departure to the south. And then what's going to happen is the air traffic controller, this ground controller, they'll come on and tell us how to depart. They'll tell us which runway to taxi to and how to get there.
Santa Monica ground, Diamond November 21 Kilo India Papa with Sierra request taxi for takeoff south departure.
Now they'll reply to us.
Diamond November 21 Kilo India Papa taxi to and hold short of runway 21 using taxiway Bravo 5. Contact tower on 120.1 when ready.
All right, so we're going to acknowledge their clearance. Whenever you get instructions, you need to read them back. So we're going to acknowledge the taxi clearance by clicking this button right here.
Taxiing hold short runway 21 using taxiway Bravo 5 Diamond Kilo India Papa.
So as we expected, because we heard it on the weather, on the ATIS, we heard that runway 21 was in use. So they're having us go to runway 21. And it says to taxiway using taxiway Bravo 5. So all the taxiways at an airport are named after a letter and a number usually. So in this case, we have taxiway Bravo, and there'll be an intersection called Bravo 5 that we'll get to, and that's where we will get to runway 21 at the end of the runway. So we turned on the taxi ribbon. So if I look around the plane here, you can see the taxi ribbon right now. So these blue arrows will show us exactly how to get there. We are already near the end of the runway. We're near where we're supposed to be, so we don't have very far to go. But if we were all the way at the other end of the airport or on the other side of the airport, it would draw this taxi ribbon for us to show us exactly how to get to runway 21 using the instructions it gave us. All right, so I'm going to hop back in, and yeah, unfortunately, it's showing us to turn around and go this way. We're just going to, because of the way our plane is, we're just going to go this direction on these dotted lines over here to get to it. Actually, no, we can't do that. We'll just do it this way. All right, we're gonna have to use our brakes to make a tight turn, but that'll be fine. All right, so we're gonna go back in the plane. Oops, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna turn my parking brake off, and then I'm gonna turn our lights on. This is something that'll be in the other checklist, but I'm gonna turn our taxi and our position lights on here. You don't really have to worry about this. You know, you can find this stuff in the checklist for the plane you're flying. In the case of the Diamond, we don't really have these instructions on when to use our lights and stuff, but something like the Cessna 172, it'll have more thorough checklists in it. And yeah, you can fly one of the other planes if you want. The 172 is cool. I like the Diamond just out of the simplicity of it having just one lever here for our throttle. And then on the downside, it does have a single fuel draw, so it'll draw from just one tank at a time. If you fly the 172, it'll draw from both tanks, or the Cessna Grand Caravan's another one. But for the Diamond, realistically, we would need to switch this every 30 minutes or so during our flight to make sure we even out and balance the fuel in each tank. But we don't really have to worry about that. I might switch it once we're up, but we have full fuel right now. That is something that can be a concern if you have one tank totally full and one tank near empty. It can imbalance you. But again, the goal here is just to get us going, get us up, and get us to our destination. So we're just going to focus on that. All right, so the parking brake is off, and I'm using my rudder pedals to turn us around here. Now, if you're on the Xbox, you're going to use the triggers for your rudder pedal. And if you're on a PC, it really matters what controllers you have, what peripherals you have. In my case, I have rudder pedals. If you don't have rudder pedals, then and you turned on that option that we reviewed earlier that's called Takeoff Rudder Auto Assist. Again, I'll show you guys that option just for review. Under the assistance options under piloting, if you do not have rudder control through your stick or your own rudder pedals or anything, you'll want to turn this option on called Takeoff Auto Rudder. And this will make it so what you can do, even though it's not realistic, you can use your stick or your yoke left and right to taxi left and right. This is not how it works in real life. You know, when you taxi, the wheel is controlled by the rudder pedals down here. So we actually steer with our feet when we're on the ground. But this will let you work, this will let you do it if you don't have rudder control based on your personal setup. All right, so we're going to continue here. So we just give it a little bit of power. Generally, you want to taxi at like a brisk walking pace. If you're going faster than that, then it could get out of hand. You could get yelled at or whatever. And it becomes harder and harder to take turns. Like if you're going at any significant speed and trying to turn onto certain taxiways or intersections on the ground, it's going to be really difficult. So you should go relatively slow most of the time, or pretty much all of the time, rather. All right, so we're just going to follow these blue arrows to get over to the runway. And we got a couple people here lined up already. Now probably, oh, something I forgot to cover is the altimeter. So we'll stop here and talk about that for a second. Now, this is something we probably won't run into an issue because of this, but basically our altitude here on the instrument, on the G1000, our altitude is right here on the right side. This number right down here, 2992, may look a little weird if you've never seen it, but this is basically a measurement of the air pressure or barometric pressure. So, you know, in the weather we're in at any moment, there is, you know, the temperature, humidity, and pressure. This is the pressure. And why this is important is because our altimeter right here, which is what tells us our altitude, is based off the barometric pressure that is currently outside the airplane. So we need to calibrate the altimeter from area to area, even during a flight, potentially, mattering how far we're flying. But at the very least, before takeoff and when we're approaching our destination, we would update this with the correct setting. And this setting is actually something that we heard at the end of the ATIS report here. So when we listened to ATIS, at the very end, it said altimeter 2997. So what it's telling us is, hey, the current barometric pressure is 2997. And the reason we need to know that is so our altitude here is accurate. Now there's a button right over here on the G1000. You can see this little label right here says baro. And this is to set the barometric pressure, or to set the altimeter, to calibrate it. And we can do that here by using this outer knob. And as I roll this with my mouse wheel, you can see it change that number. You can also see when that number changes that it's changing our altitude. Obviously, we're at the same altitude right now. We're not sinking into the ground right now. We're not levitating. Our altitude isn't changing, but the altitude that our plane thinks we're at is changing. And so this becomes, you know, this is critically important. In terms of flying casually in the sim and, you know, just having a fun time, you don't necessarily have to worry about it. You know, the simulator is as serious as you want to take it. But if you want to take it a little more seriously, you'll want to set this so your altitude is accurate. If you've ever done a flight in Microsoft Flight Sim or another one, and you keep getting yelled at by air traffic control, and they're like, we told you to go to 10,000 feet. Can you please go to 10,000 feet? And you're like, wait, it says I'm at 10,000 feet. It could be because your altimeter setting is not accurate, and therefore your altitude is not where it says you actually are. So we're going to set this to the right number. And so I'm going to turn it back to 2997. If I go back to the ATIS and check it again here, using the ATC menu, we can hear that at the very end of the info it gives us. So let's listen again for that.
Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 20.
And here it is at the very end.
2.10. Altimeter 29.
So 2997. So that's why it's giving us that number. It's so our altitude is accurate. Now, if you don't have that, you could look up some real world information. You could look up the elevation at the airport you're at. And then what you could do, so say our elevation here at the airport is 150, right? Because we have it set properly. If it was set to something else, and we didn't have ATIS available, we could just set it to the known elevation of the airport. So I would just turn this until our current altitude is our current known altitude, or our known elevation. So here, 150 feet roughly. So that's another way to set it if you don't have or see ATIS available. And ATIS won't always be available. You may be at a really tiny airport in the middle of nowhere that you're flying from, so you won't necessarily always have this option. But, I chose a relatively larger airport today in a more populated area, so we know we have that available. All right, and there's also a shortcut to set this. If you're on PC, you can just press the B button on your keyboard, B for barometric or for Bravo, and that will automatically set the altimeter setting to the current correct setting. So that's a shortcut if you don't want to go in there and mess with all the knobs like this. So now we know that our altitude is correct. All right, so now that we got our taxi permission, what we're gonna do is move over to and hold short of runway 21. So they told us to taxi to runway 21 and to contact tower once we're holding short of runway 21. So we're gonna do that. Just turn my parking brake back off. If you don't have a shortcut for parking brake, you can always use your camera to look down, find the parking brake, and click it, or use your Xbox controller to point at it and turn it on or off like this. And that goes for most of the controls. You can do that if you don't have a shortcut set. All right, and in the Diamond, because we don't actually have the full checklist, I'm just gonna do one more thing down here, and that's turn our flaps to the takeoff position. So right down here, this is just a Diamond specific thing. We take off with this single notch of flaps here. It's actually labeled TO for takeoff. So I'm gonna flip it to that setting. If you're flying something else, your checklist that we looked at earlier will probably have one that's a before takeoff list, and that'll give you that information. So you'll know to set it up for takeoff. You could take off without flaps. You'll need longer distance to actually do the takeoff, but we use the flaps in this so we can take off in a shorter amount of time, shorter amount of distance. And something else is with the weather we listened to on the ATIS there, you may have heard that it said the wind was at 270 at 7 knots, I believe. So the wind it's runway 21 that we're gonna be taking off from. And you can see that right here. We're at Bravo 5 at runway 21. And that wind is favorable for that runway. It's mostly gonna be in our face, heading towards us. And that's favorable for taking off and for landing. So since 27 is close to 21-ish, that's gonna be more favorable than the opposite end of the runway, which is runway, was it 03? I think it's runway 03, the opposite side. All right, so in most planes, they can be simplified as apply full power and wait for what's called your rotation speed and then pull back on the yoke to take off. So we'll look at that in just a second as these guys start taking off in front of us. And we'll also need to contact the tower to get their permission to actually take off. Now, everything up until here, you could basically ignore most of it if you're loading in on the runway. So we chose a parking spot to load in on, but if you load in on the runway, it's gonna automatically have the permission from ATC to take off and all that. All you have to do is turn your parking brake off, give it full throttle and take off. But I wanted to show you guys, from start to end, if you do wanna start at parking, this is how you do it. All right, so we got this Cirrus here in front of us. Oh wait, no, this is another Diamond, sorry. Sometimes I get the Diamond and the Cirrus confused when I look at them. This is another Diamond, just like ours. Not sure who we have in front of us. I can't see the name right now. We have Pittman Pike over there. Oh, Pittman Pike 69, nice. A couple guys behind us here. We got someone in a twin. I can't see your names right now. Oh, that's Mike Romeo. Mike Romeo, all right, is taking off. So the next thing we're gonna look at and learn is, for you guys who are brand new, is what's called our rotation speed. That's basically our takeoff speed. That's a speed we need to be at when we're going down the runway before we pull back on our stick or yoke to take off. So first we're gonna get permission to take off. I'm gonna bring the ATC menu up again. So that's up here in the top menu, ATC. We're gonna switch over to the tower now, because they said to contact tower when we're ready. And now that we're here, you can see the taxi ribbon actually updated to show us to line up. So that's also an indication that we can now contact tower. And now on tower, we have this option right here, request takeoff clearance. So we'll hit this to get their
Santa Monica
permission to
Tower,
actually take
Diamond
off.
November to 1 kilo India Papa ready at
While that's
runway
going
21
on,
south
down here, if I look at the screen, what's really nice about the G1000 is it shows us our rotation speed. Right here is 69. So you can see that right here.
Cleared for takeoff runway 21.
Okay, so once again, they gave us the altimeter as a reminder to make sure our altitude is accurate on our altimeter. So it's still set to 299.7, so we're going to leave that alone. Wind is 247 at 7, so they're basically reminding us, hey, the winds are favorable. Now remember, 247, sorry, I said 27. We look at 21, 24 is slightly to the right of there. So the wind will be a little off our nose to the right. Here, I'm going to hit acknowledge takeoff clearance. So we always read those back to ATC to say, yes, I heard you. We're cleared for takeoff on this runway. Like we know which runway. We're confirming it's the correct runway. All right, and so these two numbers here are the most important for our takeoff. The first one is our rotation speed. This is the takeoff speed, basically. We pull back on our yoke when we reach this speed when we're going down the runway. So in this plane, it's 69 knots. Nice. And then VY. Y is the next most important speed we're going to look at. This is our best rate of climb. So once we take off, we're basically going to pitch our nose up and down on the plane using our stick or our yoke to try to maintain a speed, an airspeed, which is right up here on this ribbon right here, of around 80 knots. And that'll give us the best rate of climb. So we'll climb at our best rate of climb to get up to our cruising altitude. All right, so let's get going. So those are the two things we need to remember most. First one, 69 knots. That's our rotation speed in this plane. If you're flying the Cessna 172, that rotation speed is going to be 55 knots. So this one needs quite a bit more speed to take off. And that's just, basically just due to the design of the airplane, how long the wings are, how much airflow needs to go over the wings, how heavy it is, things like that. Looks like I think we're lining up for a coordinated takeoff here. I'll get on the left side. All right, and then one last thing to actually verify is once you line up with the runway, just for safety, is you want to remember, like here we can see runway 21. We can see that clearly there. We know we're on the right runway. We can also go down here and look at our heading indicator. It says 21. We're at a heading of 213. So we know this is runway 21, which is the one we were cleared for takeoff on. All right, and now the last tricky part is staying on the center line while you're going down the runway. I'm going to be a little bit left here just because I think this person wants to take off. Sorry, I can't see your name. We're going to take off at the same time, do some sort of coordinated takeoff. But what we need to do, and you may have run into this before, planes have what are called left turning tendencies, which means there's a bunch of different factors, science things, right? Physics, the airflow that the propeller creates, the torque, and the that it creates just by spinning. There's a bunch of factors that are basically summed up as left turning tendencies. And this means that the plane on takeoff especially is going to want to pull to the left. And that's why if you've ever tried to take off, it pulls to the left and pulls you off the runway and you're like, what the heck's happening? So this is a normal, real thing that happens, and you counter it by using right rudder. So remember, the left and right rudder are how we steer when we're on the ground. Since we're on the runway and we're going to take off, we're still on the ground, and we need to counteract that left turning tendency by putting in right rudder to stay on the center line. So we're going to be doing that as we go down the runway to stay on the center line. Again, if you don't have rudders, say you're on a PC and you don't have rudder pedals yet, because it's impossible to buy anything nowadays and get it shipped to you, what you can do for now is, again, sorry, I'm doing this for the third time because people run into this all the time. Go here and do assistance options under piloting and put takeoff auto rudder to on. This will assist you during takeoff and do that right rudder for you automatically, basically. And what this also does, like I mentioned earlier, is when this is on, you can actually taxi the plane by using your stick left and right, which is unrealistic, but it gives you the ability to taxi by moving your stick to the left and right like this. And if you're going down the runway and you have this option on, you can also use left and right stick to stay on that center line before you take off. All right, so we're going to apply full throttle, and then we're going to wait. We're going to, use our rudder and or our stick if you have that option turned on. I'm going to use the rudder because I have rudder pedals to stay aligned on the runway as best we can. And then we're going to wait for our airspeed here to say 69, say, let's call it 70 knots. And that's when we'll slowly pull back on our stick to become airborne. As soon as we're airborne, we're gonna keep an eye on this. We're gonna try to stay flying at runway heading. And what we're gonna do is fly that runway heading as best we can, and we're gonna aim for 80 knots. So we're gonna try to get a target airspeed of 80 knots and maintain that during our climb. And that's because that's the best rate that this plane will climb at. And again, if you're flying the 172, your speeds here are gonna be 55 for rotate, and your VY, your best rate of climb, is gonna be 74. So you can use those as well, call it 75. So 55 and 75 for us in the Diamond DA40, we're gonna do roughly 70 and 80. All right, so let's get on with it. So I'm giving it full throttle, and I'm pushing in the right rudder right now. A little bit too much, so I need to correct with left. And it's best to look at the end of the runway. You don't want to look close because you'll react too fast. And we're watching for our speed down here. So I'm at 60, 65, there's 70. So now I'm pulling back on my stick slowly until we take off. So now we're taking off. And we're airborne. So I'm going to pitch up. So our speed is above 80 right now, or it's at 90 right now. So when your speed is too high, you can pull back on the stick more. So we aim higher up, we pull our nose higher up in the air, and that will decrease our airspeed. So you can see now our airspeed's down to 84, 83, 82. So we're trying to aim for that 80. All right, and they said that we're approved for south departure. Now this is something I'm gonna do. It's convenient for me because I have shortcuts bound. I can acknowledge that by opening this and clicking acknowledge. If you're on the PC, what's really nice is you can just press 1 on your keyboard. You can see how each response has a number next to it. You can just hit that number on your keyboard to reply with or without opening that window. So it's really convenient if you have a keyboard attached. And most of the time your reply is generally going to be number 1 on the keyboard. All right, so now we're taking off. You can see our altitude is going up here. We're at 1,000 feet now. And this is based on sea level, right? We were at about 150 feet. So we're at about 1150. So we've gone up about 1,000 feet so far. And so what I want to do is keep climbing. I'm just going to climb us up to our 2,500 feet before we make any turns or anything. And I'm doing that by just pulling back on the stick. Remember, we want to aim for that 80 knots. That's going to be the most efficient way for us to get up to our cruise altitude. Now we could start turning now if we wanted to. So I might as well. We're going to go this direction. We know that because it's in our flight plan. We know we're going to head to the south. We know we're going to go over to that island. If you need a reminder of any of that, you can always open your VFR map up here in the top menu. But I know that I'm going to head towards that island over there. So I'm just going to start turning left. I'm going to bank to the left. And generally you want to bank less than 30 degrees. So these little tick marks here are 10, 20, and 30 degrees. So we don't want to go beyond this 30 degree mark here when we're turning. So I'm going to go here more about the 20 degree mark. And then we're going to turn back to the right to level off. And so when these two arrows right here in the middle pointing at each other, that's how we know that, that we're basically level. All right, and then my speed here, you can see we're almost up at 2,500 feet already. So I'm just holding the nose up a little more. We're a little faster than we need to be. There's ATC again. They said frequency change approved. I'm just going to hit 1 on my keyboard to acknowledge that. You can just ignore ATC if you want to. You don't even have to reply to them. You're not going to get in trouble in any way. You can just ignore it if you really want to. Focus on flying first, and communications pretty much last. Okay, so now that we're at 2,500 feet, we're actually a little above it, so I'm going to put my nose down a little bit, and I'm also going to pull my power out a little bit. So we were at full power for our climb, but now that we're up at our target altitude, we can reduce our power quite significantly. And the power you choose is kind of up to you. Generally, you don't want to run at full power all the time. It's a huge waste. It's a stress on the engine, you know, if you want to think more realistically about it. And it's very not economical for your fuel consumption. So, and also it can make it so it's harder to stay level as well, mattering how much power you're giving it. So back in the tutorials, there's something called trim that you might have used, and I'm using that right now on my my throttle that I have here hooked up on my PC. I have a little shortcut to use trim. That basically makes it so we don't have to pull up or down or hold up or down on our stick the whole time. But instead of that, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and turn on autopilot. because I want to show you guys how to use Autopilot, because this is one of the best ways to just get to your destination and keep things really simple and let the plane do a lot of the work for you, just so you can be successful in getting to where you want to go to. So if you're using a plane with the G1000 like this, the Autopilot buttons are going to be, most of the time, they're going to be on the G1000 right here on the left side of one of the screens. So in this case, you can see there are no buttons on this one, but there are buttons over here. So I'm just going to hit AP right here, and that turns the Autopilot on. So now I'm letting go of my stick completely, and the Autopilot's activated. And we can see that it's activated if you just look here on the left screen. The green text right here, this whole area right here, from left to right, is our Autopilot status. And so the green AP means that it's turned on. And then by default, it's in two different modes. So the mode on the left is our lateral or our horizontal mode. So that's, our heading basically. And the mode on the right is our vertical mode. So are we climbing, descending, holding our altitude, things like that. And by default, the two modes that it turns on are called roll hold and pitch hold. So roll is just another way of saying bank. So you can see that it's actually still banked to the right, because that's where I was banked when I turned it on. And you can also see this other one says PIT. This is for pitch hold mode. So it's actually pitching us up to where we were pitched when I turned it on. So what it does is just basically holds us where we were when we turned it on. So what I want to do now, though, is I want to level out. I just want it to hold me straight and level, because you can see we're still climbing. I'm already up to 3,700 feet instead of 2,500. So I did a bad job with my climb. So what I'm going to do is play with some of the modes here. The first one we're going to do is our vertical mode. We're going to use altitude hold mode. So here it says pitch in the top left, right where my cursor is. We're going to change this to use altitude hold. So all I'm going to do is go over here and click on ALT. So there's this button that says ALT. As soon as I hit that, it's going to level us off. So what it did for us is it set our current altitude at 3910. That just happened to be where we were. Oh, flaps. Thanks, Les. Oh my God. Sorry, I forgot the flaps because I'm distracted. I'm putting my flaps up now. Sorry about that. If you're in the Diamond, put your flaps up. We should have done that shortly after takeoff once we're at a safe altitude. Thank you, Les. So flaps are up. And anyway, so now we see here on the altitude hold mode, so now it's saying ALT. This is altitude hold mode. So right here, it's holding us at the altitude we were at when we turned it on. And now roll mode, it's still banked to the right? We can see that the two little triangles here aren't pointed at each other. So we're actually banked to the right, and we keep turning, right? Look at us, we're turning at 245 now. Remember, we took off at about 210. So what we want to do is just have it level us off. So one way to do that is to use what's called heading mode. Now there's two steps to this. The first time I turn it on, the first step is to tell it what heading we want it to align to. So right now I just want it to go straight ahead. So over here there's this bug or this little knob here called the heading knob. And what I can do is click this and turn it. And right here there's a little blue icon, a little blue symbol right here that you can see spinning around, right? That blue symbol moving around. That is defining which heading we want the Autopilot to follow in this case. And it's also right here. It shows a little heading in text. So I'm just going to move that to be in the center of where we're heading right now. There's a shortcut you can use by pushing this button in, and that's supposed to sync it. It's a little buggy in the NXi, but it should sync it to our current heading. Anyway, all you have to do is change the heading to where you want it to go, then go back to the Autopilot and press, you guessed it, heading. So we hit the heading mode button. And now what it's going to do is turn us and hold that exact heading. I'm also going to pull our throttle back a bit more here. So you can see here on our airspeed indicator, there's this band of yellow. This isn't a dangerous band. This basically means the speed from this point on is accessible. It's usable in calm weather. So if we don't have high winds or anything like that, we can safely be in the yellow band. But I'm just going to be conservative and stay in the green band here. So we're getting a little too fast, so I'm going to pull it back. And above the yellow band, there's a red band, which illustrates the never exceed, never go this fast because it's dangerous for the structure of the airplane speed. All right, so now we're in heading mode. And what we're going to do now is we want to get over to the island. Look how far off course I am now. This is not going to get us to that island anytime soon or ever. So we want to turn to face south. So I'm already in heading mode. We can confirm that just by looking here on the autopilot. It says heading. What I can do, since it's already activated, this is kind of a shortcut for turning the plane at this point. Like if we turn the heading dial here, the heading knob, it will automatically react to the change we're making. So I'm just going to turn this to the left, and the plane's starting to bank automatically because it's activated in heading mode. It's green, which means it's active. So it's going to make the heading change for us. So I'm just going to keep turning this until it gets a little bit more to the southeast. And if I look over here on my map, I definitely want to go mostly south, but a little bit east. So I'll just keep turning that, and we'll see where we level out. So I have it set on a 152 heading right here. And so you can see the island out there as well. So that's Catalina, so we're heading out towards that way. Yeah, and there are some differences here. So the G1000, you know, just like in the real world, like there's different installations. If you happen to be flying this Cirrus SR22 in the sim, it has a whole autopilot panel here in kind of the center console area. And there are no buttons here on the autopilot. So in the SR22, did I say the Cirrus 172? In the SR22, if you're flying that one, your autopilot controls are actually here in the middle between the seats, basically. So you need to look down there. It'll actually have no buttons here. For some reason, this installation, there are no buttons on the left one, but there are buttons on the right one. In this SN172, I believe you have buttons on both sides. So you may have to hunt around and turn my landing lights on late. You may have to hunt around and find the autopilot buttons for the plane that you're flying. But the concept is the same as far as the modes go. You'll have a heading mode. You'll have another mode we'll look at in a little bit called flight level change, another one called vertical speed mode. And those are all different modes the autopilot can be in. They're either a lateral or horizontal mode, or they're a vertical mode. So in this case, we're using the lateral mode heading select or heading hold, and that will just follow whatever we have the heading bug down here set to. And then we're in the vertical mode of altitude hold. All right, so we're kind of flying towards the island now, but we're not on our magenta line over here, right? This was our pre-planned course that we wanted to be on. So I'm going to turn us more to the east using the heading bug again. And sorry, I keep calling it the heading bug. The heading bug is really this little blue symbol right here. But I'm using the heading knob to change our heading to fly more that direction. Now, if you're having trouble like moving your mouse, zooming into these screens and stuff like that, by the way, if you are using this screen, there's a little range knob here on the right. So if you use your mouse cursor or your Xbox controller to interact with that knob, that's how you can change the zoom level like this. If that's too annoying for you, you may want to instead go up to the top menu here and just turn on that VFR map and position it where it's convenient for you. You can resize it and things like that. Zoom in and out. And then this GPS tracking button at the bottom will center your plane. So whatever works for you, you can actually hit this little button to pop it out if you have multiple monitors, anything like that. If you want to make it really big on a second monitor. I usually like just, especially for the stream, I like keeping it simple and using this whenever I can to just not clutter up the screen. So I'll just zoom into this. The DA40, your arms can reach the left side and the right side. Oh, you just mean how small it is in here? Right on the throttle. Oh, sorry, your left hand would be on the stick. Oh, sorry, you guys are having a different conversation I'm not following. Sorry about that. All right, so now, we're not at the altitude we want to be at, right? I wanted to be at like 2,500 feet. So I think what we'll do now is do a descent, and we'll do that using the autopilot. We'll go down to where we wanted to be, which is 2,500 feet, at least for now. And then after that, when we get over the island and we fly by it, we're going to do a climb, and I'll show you how to climb with the autopilot as well. Now, there is a different like schools of thought over which mode to use when, but in general, the two modes that you're going to use when you climb or descend are either vertical speed mode, and another one is called flight level change, or sometimes it's called IAS or indicated airspeed mode. So we're going to use vertical speed mode to descend generally, and we're going to use flight level change mode to climb, and I'll explain why when we use each one of them. So for now, we're going to use vertical speed mode. So generally, when you're descending, you have a target rate of descent in mind. So for something like the Cessna 152 or this plane, that target rate of descent is usually around 500 feet per minute. for a comfortable rate of descent, you know, to not scare our passengers or scare ourselves. So the first thing we're going to do to make an altitude change is set which altitude we want to stop at once we get there. So you can see here we're at 3,900 feet. And what we're going to do is use the altitude knobs. So on the G1000, they're in the bottom left corner. If you're in the SR22, you may hunt for this knob in the center. Like I said before, you have different controls in the center for the SR22. So this altitude selection knob, there's actually two parts. There's an inner part and an outer part. So the inner part changes by 100 feet at a time, and the outer part changes by 1,000 feet at a time. Now I'm going to turn this, and as soon as I turn it, this is the number that's changing right here. This is our selected or target altitude. So all we have to do is use these knobs to dial in our target altitude. So I'll use the outer and inner knobs to set it to 2,500. So there's our selected altitude, our target altitude of 2,500. But you notice nothing's happening yet, right? All we're doing is telling the autopilot, hey, if you get to this altitude, hold us there. That's what's going to happen when we reach this altitude. But we're not at that altitude yet. We're at 3,900 feet. So now we need to tell it how to get down to that altitude. Remember, the vertical mode we're in is altitude hold mode, 3,900 feet, 3,910 actually. So what we're going to do is tell it how to get there. And when we descend, generally, we're going to use vertical speed mode. So all I'm going to do is go over here and click on VS for vertical speed mode. And still nothing is happening. We're just holding level here, still at 3,900 feet. And that's because we haven't told it how fast to descend yet. So here it says vertical speed, VS vertical speed mode. That is active right now. And it says 0 feet per minute. So we're not going up and we're not going down. It's holding us at 0 feet per minute. That's actually what this little 0 right here indicates on the right side of the G1000. That's our current feet per minute is 0. Actually, sorry, that's our target feet per minute. We'll get into that later. Down here in the middle, this black bar right here, sorry, this is right in the middle showing we're not ascending or descending. We're not climbing or descending right now. So all we have to do is tell it how fast to climb or descend. In general, we're going to use vertical speed mode to descend, not to climb, and I'll explain why later. So here all we have to do is change it from vertical speed from 0 to -500, let's say. So that's a general descent rate for the small plane like this. So all we have to do is use this nose up and nose down button. Remember, we're descending, so we want to use nose down. So as I click it, you can see it change the rate of descent. So now it says down at 200 feet per minute. So I'm just going to keep clicking nose down until I get to where I want to be. So there's -500. So now we can see -500 at the top here. That's our target rate of descent. And then right here, this white number is our actual rate of descent. And this could vary based on the wind, based on our power settings. So it'll try its best to get us at a target of 500 feet per minute. So now we're descending at 500 feet per minute. And it'll go down at 500 feet per minute until we get to 2,500 feet, which we set as our target. Once we get to 2,500 feet, it's going to anticipate us reaching that, and it's actually going to level us off right before then, and then hold us at 2,500 feet. So this little text here that says ALTS, this is actually the mode called selected altitude hold. So this basically means it's on standby in white, and it's saying, well, we're descending at 500 feet per minute in vertical speed mode. You have the target right here set, our selected altitude at 2,500. And what's on standby here automatically is a capture mode saying, I'm going to capture and hold when we get to 2,500 feet. So that's what that little Alt-S means. Altitude selected hold mode. It's going to hold when we get to that selected altitude. And all the while this is happening, which part of the reason why I love using Autopilot, and especially in Microsoft Flight Sim, is things are so nice to look at. Like, you know, people use Autopilot in real life because of the mental, you're basically all the things, the taxation on your brain, you know, all the things you have to do at once. You remove some of those stresses by automating things, right? So the Autopilot is a huge help in automating. If you're in real life and you're talking to air traffic control and you're doing a bunch of other things you need to do as a real pilot, you know, these things help you manage your workload. So, but in the sim, you know, it's really nice to use it to, you know, make it so you're going to get to your destination. You're going to fly past all the waypoints you chose in the world map and see the landmarks you want to see. And it gives you the freedom to not worry about controlling the plane while you're moving the camera around. You know, you can move it around in the cockpit to look around. You can go up to the camera menu up here at the top, and you can switch to the external camera like this. If it gets a little weird, you can hit the reset button to just reset it. And you can sightsee, you can look at the landmarks you're passing by, or if you're a virtual photographer, you want to use the showcase camera. This is how you can get those really cool screenshots using the drone. This is really easy to do with an Xbox controller. And then you can mess with all of the focus settings here, change it to manual focus like I was showing earlier. And you just get a really cool screenshot of your plane and stuff. So you can mess with this, mess with the focus, and use the drone camera like that. But anyway, using Autopilot, it frees you up to do those things and have fun with it. All right, so remember, this whole time we're still descending. One thing to keep in mind when you're descending, you can see now it's leveling us off, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if you're descending and you were at a high speed before, you could see our airspeed goes up, right? Because we're descending, our airspeed is increasing because we're pitching the nose down, and therefore our airspeed is going up. So generally when you descend, you want to pull your throttle back a bit just to make sure that you're still in a safe speed. So we don't want to redline it. In this case, the winds are calm. Here it shows that we have 2 knots of a tailwind here. And if you want to turn this on, you can do that by going down to these buttons down here under the PFD options. And there's a wind button down here. You can play with the different options. This is another reason why Autopilot's great is we're here in the middle of our flight. We can go down here and start exploring the G1000 and playing around with the different settings and learning about them. As long as we're not telling our Autopilot to bring us down to negative 200 feet, we're going to be pretty safe. So you can, get familiar with the avionics and stuff. All right, so now if I look over here, we're totally off course again, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch from heading mode over to a different mode called navigation mode. Now, in our case, there is one more step we have to do to make this work correctly, and that's because we're using a GPS flight plan. Right here, the little heading indicator here and the text in the middle here is green. And what we want to do is switch this so it's magenta. That's because magenta corresponds with a GPS flight plan. So if we don't do this, then our Autopilot's not actually going to know to follow this magenta line. So all the magenta stuff, for the most part, refers to GPS-powered capabilities. So we have a GPS flight plan put in that we did on the world map, and we want to use navigation mode. To prepare for that, in my case, this is all green instead of magenta. And to change it to magenta or GPS mode for our navigation, we just need to use this little button down here called CDI. So we'll just hit this until it's magenta, and now it says GPS. It may have been set up like that for you automatically, but it's worth double checking before you use navigation mode. So what we're going to do now is switch to navigation mode. So if we use navigation mode instead of heading mode, this is going to follow our flight plan for us automatically. It's going to fly to that magenta line. There is one caveat I'll show you as soon as we hit it. This is an NXi thing, if you're using the G1000 NXi. I'm going to hit navigation mode, and nothing is happening. That's weird. So it's supposed to fly us to the magenta line, right? So this is specific to the G1000 NXi, which I'm using right now. You can use it if you want. If you're using the stock G1000, you haven't installed the NXi yet, then it'll just turn you right away. It should be working for you already. In the case of the NXi, this is made to mimic the real world NXi, how it works. And how it works in the real NXi is that it will not activate the navigation mode for the Autopilot if you're too far off the course you're supposed to be on. So we need to manually get ourselves over there. And by manually, I mean we need to do it in a way that's not using navigation mode. We're already using heading mode. You can see that's activated, right? It's still in green on heading mode. GPS here, this is referring to our navigation mode, that's on standby. So what we need to do is fly towards that course. So all I'm going to do, right here, you can actually see where the course is on this instrument. This is called the HSI, but on this instrument, this broken line is showing us where our intended course is. So it's actually way towards the right. See, we're heading to the left of this arrow. It's over here to the right of the arrowhead. So all I have to do is move the heading knob around and point us towards that broken part of the line. So I'm just moving it over here. So we'll be going at that line at an angle. And now what the NXi will do is once we get close enough to that current leg that we're on, this current magenta line, it'll automatically switch into GPS mode or navigation mode, and then it'll take over for us. We just need to get it close enough to that line first before it'll actually activate. And that's NXi specific. So now that we're turning, we're going towards that. And you can see it over here on our map. We're flying towards the line we were supposed to be on this whole time while I've been blabbering. So once we get close enough to that, it's going to automatically switch over to navigation mode, and then it'll turn and follow that line to our first waypoint. And so that first waypoint, we did that in the menu on the world map where I clicked and I set a custom waypoint to fly over Catalina Island over here. So it's just called user 1, like custom user waypoint number 1. And if we want, we can hit this flight plan button down here and see all the waypoints that are in our list. So we're heading from the airport still to our first waypoint. Now, once we get to the first waypoint, the autopilot is going to automatically turn us to the second waypoint, and then to the third waypoint, and then towards Santa Barbara Airport. So when we have navigation mode on, it's just super powerful. It does all that work for us. And now this whole time I haven't been talking to air traffic control. So I think technically we don't even have to. It matters what airspace you're in and all that. There's a lot of complicated real life rules for this. For when you need to be in contact with ATC, or if you need to have equipment that shows them where you are. It's kind of too advanced. I don't know all the rules personally. But anyway, if we want to, we can go to ATC again, and we can get what's called flight following. So we have a little bit of communication with air traffic control. They'll give us traffic alerts. They'll tell us when we're close to our destination airport, so that's kind of nice. So while the autopilot's flying us over here to our course and towards the island over here, I'm just going to use the ATC menu to contact the nearest controller. So in this case, it's called an approach controller. It could be called center or something like that, mattering where you're flying and who you're near. You can also see that the islands here are obviously higher up than sea level. We're at 2,500 feet. So if we wanted to climb above these, we could do that. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is go ahead and request flight following. So we're basically going to say, like, hey, you know, we're gonna show us where we're gonna show you where our plane is. And turn on our transponder. Can you tell us if there's any traffic nearby? Can you tell us when we're getting close to our destination airport? Things like that. They give us some instructions. We just acknowledge those instructions, and it'll automatically set it up for us. It'll basically turn on our transponder so they can see us on their radar. So now they're giving us some information. So this is the benefit of talking to ATC. They're telling us where they're seeing us on their radar. They're telling us what altitude they're seeing us at to confirm, yes, that is the altitude we're at. That is us on your radar. And then they, again, give us that altimeter setting. So they're also reminding us, hey, based on the current weather, this is the current barometric pressure or altimeter setting. And that's a reminder to us to make sure that our altimeter is at the correct setting. So when they see we're at 2,500 feet, they expect us to be at this altitude or whatever. They know we're actually at this altitude. Or we know we're actually at this altitude. All right, so now we have flight following. So they'll probably not talk to us much. They may talk to us if there's any traffic on the way. They'll alert us to traffic coming towards us and tell us to confirm that we have the traffic in sight, make sure there's not going to be any kind of a collision hazard or anything like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this window. And what we're going to do now is climb. So we looked at vertical speed mode. We're not yet in GPS mode yet because we're not close enough to the line. We got pretty far off course. So actually what I'm going to do is we're going to just turn to the right a little bit more. We just got like drastically off course because I was talking the whole time. So I'm just going to turn us a little more to get towards that line. We're basically going to fly over the first waypoint ourselves just using heading mode. But the navigation mode is still on standby, we can see, so it'll take over once we get close enough. Now, say this was, we saw this in the distance and there was a huge mountain in front of us we needed to climb. How do we do a climb with Autopilot? Well, we use another vertical mode. You can use vertical speed mode if you want to. Vertical speed mode will let us dial in, feet per minute. We used it to descend just now. We descended at 500 feet per minute. And what the Autopilot does is it pitches the plane up and down, pitches the nose up and down until it's getting a vertical speed of what you set. Now, why this is dangerous for climbing is because the higher you get, the harder it is for the plane to maintain its rate of climb. So you actually, as you get higher and higher into the atmosphere and the air gets thinner and thinner, you cannot climb as quickly. So the dangerous part of using vertical speed mode is, say we set vertical speed mode and we said, all right, I want you to climb at 800 feet per minute. As it's climbing, if we're going to a much higher altitude, say we're going up to like 10,000 feet or something like that, as we get higher and higher and the air gets thinner, it won't be able to really maintain that at the same speed. So we're going to get slower and slower and slower because the plane is going to keep trying to pitch us up and up to maintain that rate of climb that we set. So you can see how that could get dangerous. If we get too high, the plane isn't powerful enough to maintain that rate of climb we set. Say we set 800 feet per minute and we just kept it there. Our plane would keep pitching up and up. The autopilot would keep pitching our plane up to try to maintain that 800 feet per minute. And because it's pitching up, we're losing airspeed. And that could ultimately make us stall if it gets slower and slower and slower. So all that said, the preferred way to climb is using another mode that's called flight level change mode. Okay, you can see here we got over the point here and our GPS is changing now. I might have gotten us to, okay, it switched over to the next leg. Okay, so now the magenta line switched over here. So luckily we don't have to make any changes. It detected that we were at the waypoint we're supposed to be at, close enough, and it switched over to this next leg of our flight here. It's going to take us back towards the coast. So we put this in on the world map. So now we're flying back towards the coast. And you can see it's flying, it's turning to get us over to that course. And down here you can see how the broken line is getting closer and closer to the middle, so it's getting on course for us. It's going to go a little bit more to the right. Okay, so anyway, the second mode, what we're going to use for climbing is called flight level change, and there's a button down here called FLC, so that's flight level change. In a different plane, it may say IAS, that's indicated airspeed, but it's the same concept. And what this mode lets us do is define how fast of an airspeed we want to be at while we're climbing. You could use it for descent, but primarily we use flight level change for climbing, especially in a small plane like this. So the steps to climb or descend, the first step is the same. The first thing we're going to do is change our target altitude. So right here with these knobs in the bottom left, mattering which plane you're flying, you'll have to find this altitude knob. I'm going to change this to a higher altitude. So we're going to go up to 4,500 feet. Actually, let's make it even higher. Let's go up to 6,500. Now I could use vertical speed mode, but I'm not going to because I don't want to have to worry about my airspeed. I don't want to worry about turning that number lower and lower the higher we get. So I'm going to use flight level change mode. So I'm just going to press FLC, and then over here again, nothing is happening when we press it the first time. Right over here it says flight level change now, and it says 121 knots. So instead of saying feet per minute, it's saying an airspeed. And remember from when we took off, we have an ideal or best rate of climb speed for every plane. So we could climb all the way down to that speed if we wanted to. And if you remember from takeoff, that speed in this plane is 80 knots. I can actually look that up again if I want to with the G1000 by hitting this little button down here, timer and references. So if I open that, you can see those reference speeds right here. Our rotation speed was 69. Our best rate of climb was 80. So if we want, we can change flight level change this knots right here from 121 down to 80 if we want. We could keep it higher, but generally we'll want to just not go below our VY speed. There's another speed below that we could use if we wanted to. That's kind of to go up as quickly, basically with the littlest amount of ground covered. We're not going to worry about that. I'm just going to hit nose down until we get to 80 just to show you. And what I'm going to do at the same time is, again, I'm going to put our throttle up to maximum for our climb to make sure we have enough power. So I have this at 80, and what it's doing now is instead of pitching us to get a target feet per minute, it's pitching us to get a target airspeed. And so what this does is as we climb higher and higher, it doesn't really matter that the air is getting thinner because the autopilot is going to automatically pitch our nose down as we get higher to maintain that airspeed. This might be getting a little bit advanced, so if you have any questions, just ask me. Hopefully this makes sense. So the rule of thumb I use with Autopilot is If you're descending, you use vertical speed mode, and you put in a feet per minute, so like negative 500 feet per minute. If you're climbing, first make sure your throttle is in so you have enough power. And we use flight level change mode, and we tell it what speed to maintain. So this will maximize how fast we climb by using our VY speed that we saw when we took off. So hopefully that all makes sense. So now it's climbing, and you can see we're at 950 feet per minute right now. Is this Mr. Tommy's DA40? No, this is the stock DA40 with Microsoft Flight Sim. So if you have, everybody has this plane, this is the DA40NG. But I am using the G1000 NXi mod. This is available in the Microsoft Flight Sim store in the marketplace. It's free. You can use the stock G1000 as well, but the NXi will become the actual stock G1000 eventually. So, you know, you can get a head start on learning it if you want. I think it's much, much better. You can use a lot of more advanced things with it already. Fuel tanks are imbalanced. Yep. So yeah, this is something I mentioned when we took off. So what Jake is saying is, because in this plane, you can see it draws from one tank at a time in the Diamond. So down here, we have a fuel selection switch down here. So what I could do, you know, this is more of an advanced thing. Like I could turn on my fuel pump here and switch over to the other tank. This is something we'll have to do to keep the weight balanced. It's a little more advanced. If you're flying the Cessna, what's nice about the Cessnas is most of them, I think all of them actually, they draw from both tanks at the same time. So you don't have to worry about switching the tank like you would in this Diamond or in like a Piper Arrow or a Warrior or something like that. Or even the Cirrus. The Cirrus also doesn't draw from both tanks. The Cessna is a little more unique in that it draws from both. But yeah, there we go. We're switched over to our other tank now. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, this is one of the downsides to the Diamond is it draws from one tank at a time. So you would, you know, more realistically, if you wanted to do this, you would switch your tanks every 30 minutes or so. We're probably past 30 minutes in our flight already. Oh, right, because the Cessnas are high wings. Yep, gravity fed. Yeah, so we're in a low wing here. So yeah, I don't know too much about this, but I think what Les is talking about is, yeah, because the high wings, obviously the tanks are above us, they can be gravity fed down into the engine, whereas here in the low wing, we need the pumps to pull the fuel up into it instead. But I'm not super familiar with all of that stuff. Chat can definitely educate more than I can. That's the emergency tank. The dual transfer switch is below the MFD. Oh, really? Oh, this fuel transfer right here? Oh, you just turn this on to transfer? Oh, this is the emergency. Wow, look at this. I'm learning new stuff. Every time I do this stream, you guys are teaching me, so I appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't realize this wasn't left to right. You're right. This is, in the Diamond, it is emergency here. So we're supposed to use this fuel transfer switch instead. I thought that was to, so you use this to balance them out? But you wouldn't leave this on all the time, right? All right, I'll see what happens. Thanks, Jake. So I think it, so sorry, in the Piper, so sorry, in the, let's see, the Arrow, or the Archers, like the Warrior, the Arrow, they have a left-right fuel selector. I actually didn't realize this was emergency and not left-right. It balances and you need to watch it. That's interesting. Cirrus has a switch in the middle. Yeah, I know this Cirrus has, maybe I'm wrong about the Cirrus too. The Cirrus has a fuel pump and a fuel pump boost switch in the middle. I believe you turn to boost when you switch the tanks. But yeah, they're all different. Clearly, they're all different. I didn't even realize this one had a normal and not a left and a right. You don't leave it on all the time. Okay, cool. All right, we'll leave that on. I'll probably forget about it in a minute here, so we'll leave it. You turn it off when the fuel's balanced. Got it. Awesome. All right, thanks, Jake. All right, so now let's check this out. So we're still, we were climbing. Sorry, we've leveled out here. So once again, because we use the altitude select, it's leveled us off at 6,500, and now it's holding us at 6,500. And then our speed's in the yellow. This is okay since, actually, let's check the wind. Gonna pull it back to be in the green. So in the Diamond, I think roughly we're usually at like 75 to 90% power. It matters if you're going for like fuel economy or just speed performance. And ATC is yelling at us, so let's see what they said here because I missed it. They're passing us off to another controller. So if you're using ATC, they'll check in periodically during your en route portion of your flight. They're switching us off from one controller to another, so we're going to acknowledge the handoff. And as usual, if you have a keyboard plugged in, you can just press 1 for all these shortcuts instead of opening the window. So if I just hit 1 on my keyboard, you can see it selected 1 here. And then it says contact SoCal approach. So even without the window open, I can just hit 1 on my keyboard and then it will contact SoCal approach. So that's really convenient if you have a keyboard, you can just use 1 most of the time for kind of these routine ATC communications. All right, so this new controller told us the altimeter is 2997 still, and that's been the altimeter since we took off, so that hasn't changed. If they gave us something else, then what we would do is update this to make sure our altimeter is correct and that we're at the altitude that we want to be at. So if we do not update it, then we'll be at a different altitude than we think we'll actually be at a different altitude than we are. So it's important to keep that updated if you want that to be accurate. All right, so just a recap of those 2 modes we did. So we used flight level change mode to climb, and flight level change mode lets us tell it what airspeed to hold or what airspeed to aim for during a climb. You could use it during a descent too, but generally when you descend, you have like a target feet per minute in mind, because that helps you calculate how far out you want to start descending to get down to your destination airport once you get to that point. All right, so, oh yeah, and then the other mode besides flight level change, we used vertical speed mode before to do the descent. So vertical speed mode lets you change based on feet per minute. You would say something like, let's descend at 500 feet per minute or 1,000 feet per minute. And then flight level change mode is, I want to make a change in my flight level or my altitude, and I want to enter a target airspeed. So in general, I would recommend using vertical speed for descending and flight level change for climbing. Especially if you're climbing to a very high altitude, flight level change is the safe way to go, because it'll make sure that you don't get into a scenario where your autopilot is pitching you up so much as the air gets thinner and thinner to try to maintain that rate of climb where it'll put you into a stall. So it could do that. So that's why we use flight level change mode. So for example, like if we use flight level change mode to go really high and our plane wasn't able to climb fast enough, it would just basically level us off. It would just stop climbing because it wouldn't be able to hit that target feet per minute or that target airspeed anymore. Whereas with vertical speed mode, it'll just try its best, even if it's dangerous, to reach that feet per minute target that you've set for it. All right, so I feel like we've learned a lot about autopilot already. So if you don't want to use autopilot when you fly, what you could do, based on the flight plan we put in on the world's map, is use the range knob over here, or you can hit V on your keyboard to use the VFR map, which you can pan around like this. If you're on Xbox or something, you could go up to the top menu here and access it from the top toolbar. And you would just be able to hand fly based off of this map, and the route that we programmed in if you want to hand fly it. But I do like showing people how to use autopilot just because autopilot makes it, really convenient. It frees you up to do other things like play with talking air traffic control. And, you can go away from your keyboard if you have to go do laundry or make dinner or something like that. You have a really long haul flight. You can set up your autopilot and then, have the confidence that it's going to keep you on the right route while you're doing stuff in real life. And then down here, all right, so Jake showed us how the fuel transfer works. So it looks like it's balanced now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So today, that's what I learned, is that I've been switching to my emergency tank in the Diamond instead of using the fuel transfer switch. So thanks again, Jake. All right, so I turned that off because our fuel is balanced now. These are things you don't really have to worry about. You know, it isn't great if you get imbalanced, like more fuel in one or the other, but you know, I like to remind people that the sim is as serious as you want to take it, right? Like, if you want to just mess around and do barrel rolls and just have fun with it and fly through a city, you know, at an extremely fast speed, like whatever, do what is fun for you, right? Like, some people will take it more seriously than others. I take some flights more seriously than others. Sometimes I just keep it really casual, like, you know, ignoring ATC right now to talking to the mic instead. So, you know, it's as serious as you want to take it. And I want people to be able to get to the airport they want to get to the landmarks they want to get to. And I think learning the basics of the autopilot can really help people do that. So, you know, we drew out this quick flight plan over Catalina and then back to the shore, back to the coastline over here. And, you know, we're using Autopilot to take us on this route we drew out. So, you know, for a new pilot or somebody that just wants to do some sightseeing, this is like really good to learn because you can just get anywhere in the world that you want to fly by. You know, if you want to fly by Everest, you want to fly by the Statue of Liberty, you can do this same planning in the world map and get to where you want to go. All right, so they passed us off again here, so we're going to go ahead and contact the next controller.
November to 1 Kilo India Papa 6,500
and something else you can do, this was new in the last big sim update, but there's also this flight assistant that's up here at the top. So we're learning to use the autopilot manually, but there is this whole newish flight assistant menu option up here that'll get you to airports and landmarks and things like that. So this is really convenient if you want to take it really casual. You don't even want to deal with autopilot. You could take off and use this menu. You could even use this when you're on the ground and tell it to take off for you. By turning on AI piloting here, you can see there are all these options, stall protection. You could just check all of these on, and then what you can do is go into these different options here and choose between airports. You can see we can just choose between what's near us, Santa Monica, where we started, LAX, which is nearby. We can switch to cities. It'll show nearby cities. If there were any landmarks near us, you know, we're over the water right now, so there's not anything, but it would show you things like, you know, the Statue of Liberty or Mount Rushmore, whatever you're nearby. So you could use this and just basically turn on the AI piloting and tell it where to take you. So this is another really easy way to just get to those destinations so you can check them out. Because, you know, like I keep saying, this sim is gorgeous, and, you know, it's really nice to be able to fly to these different areas. You know, especially if you're on an Xbox or something, it's pretty challenging to fly, to interact with autopilot on an Xbox controller. So yeah, I definitely recommend learning these helpful systems, the assistants and things like that, learning autopilot, and just take it one step at a time. You know, like the goal is to get you to what you want to see. Or later on, the goal might be to learn the actual checklist and learn how to do more of the advanced things. So yeah, just the sim is what you want to make of it. So you know, I'm excited if somebody wants to do barrel rolls, or if somebody wants to learn the more advanced procedures that like I'm interested in and I'm learning every day how to do these things. Yeah, it's what you make it. As long as you're having fun then and seeing the things you want to see, then I'd call it a success. All right, so we're getting passed off again. So the LA airspace is insane. There's a lot of overlapping airspaces and a lot of controllers here. So, and even the sim is, you know, it's going to get a little confused because there's just so many possible controllers to talk to. Sometimes it's changing you every minute. It's not necessarily realistic, but anyway, we just keep replying to them here. All right, and we got an altimeter change this time. So 29 or 8. So we're going to go down, and what I can do is hit B on my keyboard if I want to automatically update it, or I can use the little barrow button or knob right here to automatically change it to 2998. That just keeps our altitude reading accurate. All right, so we're flying towards the coast here, and then once we get to this next waypoint, you can see we're going to turn up towards Santa Barbara. So Santa Barbara is our destination up here. And what you can do actually is, like, if we're in a long phase on route like this and you want to save some time, there are actually 2 commands you can bind to increase or decrease what's called the sim rate. It's basically fast forwarding or time warping. It's not really warping. It's more like, you know, double time or quadruple time. Time just passes faster. So what you can do if you're on like a super long flight, you want to accelerate towards the destination airport. You don't have enough time to sit through, you know, however long it's going to take to get there. What you can do... Oh, is my game crashing? Oh no. I think my game is actually crashing. I hit escape on my keyboard and now it looks like it's crashing. Please don't crash. Horrible timing. I don't know if you guys can still hear me or not. Let me check the stream. Escape on my keyboard and now... Yeah, okay. So the stream's still up, but my game is frozen. This is the worst timing. Oh, Les says the Cirrus has it in the middle. Yeah, it does have the fuel from the middle. DA40 only takes fuel from the left tank. That's why I need to pump the right to the left. Oh, got it. Awesome. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. How's it going, Parrot? Waited out. Yeah, it's sorry, guys. It's frozen right now. I don't have too many crashes. I try to not run too many mods. You can still hear me. Okay, cool. Yeah, I try to not run too many mods because, you know, the more things you put on it, the more likely it is to have issues. I will give it a few more minutes here. Worst case scenario, what we're going to do is we'll just take off again. I'll just restart the flight from the runway, and then we'll just take off and I'll do some of that time acceleration I was just talking about to get us to Santa Barbara faster, and then we can do the landing. But I do want to complete the flight so somebody that watches this later too can, you know, do an entire flight on their own, hopefully. Yeah, it is still frozen, unfortunately. I'll give it a couple more minutes here. Turn on some elevator music in the background to pass the time. Yeah, it's at the... I can't even move the flight sim window. I played windowed when I stream on this ultra wide that I have, but yeah, it is completely frozen. But actually, I noticed that at the top, you don't see me in this sim anymore. No, I don't see the top toolbar anymore that I had. That's actually gone. So I don't know if that's good or bad. All right, I'm going to count down. We'll do 60 more seconds and then we will restart the sim. It's a bummer. Sorry, guys. F in the chat from Radio Man. Gorax, during the downtime, I just want to say thanks for all the instructional videos. No problem. I feel like I'm losing my voice. I took a couple weeks off to play some other video games with some friends, but apparently my voice is it's feeling a little stressed already just talking for the last 2 hours. On the first fuel transfer, let the pump run for an extra 15 minutes, then you can turn the pump on every half hour. Got it. Yeah, I had no idea that it only drew from the left tank. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm mostly flying in the Cessna myself, so I get that the convenience of the both fuel selector. All right, it doesn't look like it's coming back, so I'm gonna Alt Control Delete here, Task Manager, and kill the sim. Oh, there it goes. Sorry about that, guys. That's a bummer. All right, I'm going to restart it. We're going to take off. I'll take off from Santa Monica again. We're just going to fly directly to Santa Barbara this time. F to pay respect. It's a bummer. I actually don't know if I've crashed. If I crashed on a stream before. I'm not sure. Might be a first. I actually rarely crash even when I'm just making the videos. And I realize, yeah, I haven't made a video for a few weeks. I'm hoping for the next NXi update next week or so. We'll see when it happens. I'm not sure when the next one's going to be. But Sim Update 6 that's coming out, they said in the latest dev update that it's, I believe, on the 19th, right? Is that Tuesday? So Sim Update 6, yeah, that's on Tuesday. So we'll have the next Sim update then, so that'll be awesome. It's a pity that the program hung up. It's probably due to the sim rate. I actually didn't even hit it yet. I just hit escape on my keyboard to show you guys where to set those shortcuts for the sim rate. I didn't even hit it yet, so that's just bad timing, I guess. I will, I'll play with fire and use the sim rate again when we get back in here so we can accelerate and get to the landing. The last update killed your sim when you started. You had to download the whole game. That actually happened to me back in, I think it was like Sim Update 4 or something. Maybe it wasn't the latest one. It was like the last one before this one. Anyway, yeah, I got the thing where it checked for updates and it told me I needed to download like 100+ gigabytes randomly. I have no idea why it happened. So I was just like, all right, guess I'm not using the sim tonight. hit update, went to bed. 40 hours to install? Oh man, I think, you know, when the sim updates come out, they run into, I think what everybody does, like all these big game updates, you know, the servers just get bombarded by people updating. So, yeah, believe the next NXi will be coincide with a sim update. Yeah, that's probably the case. Yeah, we haven't had one in a couple weeks. So hopefully there's one for Tuesday. Yeah, and they did, I think they posted some previews of the next one in their Discord. If you guys are in the working title Discord, in their Discord channel called Progress, you can look at screenshots that they post. Yeah, and they posted a screenshot that shows missed approach procedures and a hold. So that was the last one they posted. It was a couple weeks ago. And they also showed a screenshot where you can activate the missed approach procedure. So that'll be new in the next version. So I'm looking forward to trying that out when it comes out. All right, let's try this again. Let's see. I see some of you guys. I have Endgame on my friends list, so I see him there. I'll take off from Oxnard. So I'm just going to choose Oxnard. I'm going to pull the time back again, and then I'm going to choose Santa Barbara as our arrival. It's only a 19-minute flight. All right. We have the Diamond chosen again, and I'm going to let it spawn in on the runway this time. So we're not going to do the whole startup. So we're going to let it, it'll just be ready to take off once we go. Pull my little throttle lever here on my throttle quadrant back to idle, so we don't take off until we're ready. All right, here we go again. All right, so we're taking off. I'm taking off again here from Point Magoo. All right, so we're all set. So all I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do here, and you can do this when you take off. This is something I didn't cover because we didn't talk about Autopilot yet. But now that we've played with Autopilot a little bit, the first thing I'm going to do is press B on my keyboard to set the barometric pressure. So we set our altimeter. And then we're going to set our Autopilot before we even take off. So what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and set it up to, let's do 4,500 feet. So I use the altitude knobs. We're at 4,500 feet on the selected here. And what you can actually do is set all of the other modes up in advance before you take off. So I'm going to hit heading mode, and I'm going to hit flight level change mode. So what I'm going to do is put the heading mode straight ahead. So I'll just sync it up to 211. That's our current heading for the runway heading. Flight level change mode says 3 knots. So I'm going to hit the nose up button until it gets to 80 knots. Remember, in this plane, VY, that's our best rate of climb. It's shown right here, 80. So that Y right there refers to our best rate of climb. So we'll match that 80 knots right here. And now what we can do, as soon as we take off and we're up 500 feet or so, we can hit Autopilot to turn it on, and it'll automatically follow these two settings. So it'll keep our runway heading, so heading 211, and then it'll start our climb up to 4,500 feet. So I do this almost every time I take off. I set up the Autopilot in advance. So actually, it's a good thing we crashed. We could see that little procedure there. So again, full power, and we're going to need right rudder as always when we're taking off. So I'm putting in right rudder and looking down at the end of that, at the end of the runway there. I need a little left rudder right now. And we're just waiting for 70 knots on our airspeed down there at the bottom. So we're at 60, 65. Now 70, we pull back on the yoke or the stick, and now we're up. And now we're just gonna keep pulling back so we slow down because we wanna aim for that 80 knots in this plane. And if you're flying the 172, then you're aiming for 75. But in the Diamond, we get a little more power, so we're aiming for 80 instead.
Diamond Kilo
pulling
India
back even
Papa,
more.
continue for west departure.
All right, you said continue. I'm gonna hit 1 on my keyboard to reply to him.
Tower, Diamond, November, to
All right, now we're up
India
about
Papa,
500
continue for
feet.
west
So what I'm gonna do
departure.
is I have a button on my stick I can use to turn my autopilot on, or you can just click the autopilot button down here. So I'm just gonna hit that and slowly let go of my stick. All right, now you can see that it's holding that climb for us. So it's gonna keep climbing up to 4,500 and it's turning back to our heading of 211. So I had veered off to the left a little bit. So what's really nice, that's what's really nice about setting up the autopilot before you take off is once you get up, you just hit the autopilot button to turn it on and it'll just follow those settings that you put in beforehand. All right, so now since we took off towards the water, we want to turn to the right to get over here to our course. So what we're going to do is just use the heading knob right here. We're already in heading mode. So I'm just going to turn the heading knob around. And again, I'm going to aim for the broken side of this line because that's where our course is. It's represented over here. It's showing the broken line, showing us where the course we want to be on is. And once again, let's put our flaps up. I forgot that again. Normally wouldn't do that while we're turning like this. I would have put them up on the initial takeoff while we're going straight still. But I'll just put the flaps up there. Mattering which plane you're in, the procedures are different. So in this one, the flaps are at that first notch of flaps there in the takeoff position. All right, so now it's climbing us. And now that we're heading towards this, I'm going to also switch us to nav mode. So I'm just going to hit nav. And again, like I explained earlier, in the NXi, we have to get closer to our course before the nav mode, or the GPS nav mode right here, it says GPS, until that actually turns on. So we just need to, we're flying towards it using heading
Diamond Kilo
mode.
India Papa, leaving my airspace frequency change approved.
All right, so now we're on our way. So now we're not too far from Santa Barbara. If I go down here and hit the FPL button, this will show us our flight plan. And we could also see this over here at the top because Santa Barbara is our only waypoint that we have this time around. So it's showing me the distance is 37 miles. And if I go over here and look too, you can see the distance between the two it'll show. So from that airport over to Santa Barbara is 40.3 miles. But then here at the top, we can see how many are remaining, 38.4 miles remaining. All right, again, I'll go up and respond to air traffic control here, acknowledge the frequency change. Now, if this stuff annoys you, you're just annoying, it gets annoying to hit this every single time to switch. If you go up here to the assistance menu, this little like captain's hat and face, one of the options in here is ATC, auto AI radio communications here, AI radio communications. You can turn this on, and then the co-pilot will handle talking to air traffic control for us. So that's nice if you don't want to deal with doing that every time yourself, but you still want ATC to talk to you and give you information like your altimeter setting, tell you when you're close to your destination airport and stuff like that.
Squawk 6576.
All right, there's Mike Romeo 2000 there below us again. So it looks like we're catching up. Subdued Rat is over there. Oh, he's taking off as well.
Contact 4 miles northwest of Point Lagoo, 3,900 feet. Altimeter 30.00.
Roger, Diamond Kilo India Papa.
All right. So we're still climbing here. So I set it to 4,500 feet. So remember, we set it at 4,500. We use flight level change mode, so that's bringing us up. We have nav mode on, so it's going to take us directly to our waypoints. And in this case, just because I crashed and had to restart, the game crashed, and we had to restart. We're just going to go directly to Santa Barbara now instead of those other waypoints I had in before. What do we got? How do you get the play pause button in the top menu? Oh yeah, so if you need to customize you can customize this menu, and you do that under the gear menu right here on the right. So I actually think I have objectives turned off. So yeah, you go under this little gear icon. This should always be there, and you can turn on or off the different options. So if you find yourself not using certain ones, like say you never use the basic controls, you turn that off. So what that'll show you is your controls based on what controllers you have. If you have keyboard, mouse, I have the honeycomb throttle, so it's showing me. It's actually not showing me anything. It should be showing me a list of what each one of these are bound to. And then you can change to your different, actually this looks like it's a little buggy right now. It should be letting me pick my different peripherals and then seeing the important settings or the important key binds for each one of them. No, Parrot, I'm not gonna do the ILS for this just because I'm trying to keep it a little more basic, but I do wanna show people, and this is an NXi specific thing, which is the visual runways and the visual approaches. I don't really want to get into the procedures, you know, involving, you know, the ILS or an RNAV approach and having to pull up the, you know, approach plates and stuff like that. But I do want to show people a really easy way to get lined up with the runway. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend the NXi, even for a beginner, is because the NXi lets you use what's called a visual approach. And basically we can use it to line up for line up to land on a specific runway. And what's really great is that it works for every airport in the entire sim. So actually I could show you how to do that right now. And what we could do is fly to the airport, and we could fly in the traffic pattern, kind of like you did back in the basic training or the basic tutorials. You would fly at, you know, 1,000 feet above the ground. You would make a few left-hand turns and land at the runway of your choice. You know, assuming that it's a left-hand traffic pattern, which is kind of the default traffic pattern direction, is the left-hand turns. Anyway, what I want to show you guys though is, because I want to make it, I kind of want to, I think my goal in general is, like, especially with these like beginner focused streams, is get you to where you want to be, you know, like as simply as possible. The autopilot can seem a little intimidating, but once you learn a couple autopilot modes, you know, we just learned heading and nav mode to be able to point the plane where we want it, and we learned the vertical speed and flight level change mode to change altitude. Once you get those down, you can set up any flight plan you want in the world map and get to where you want to go. And yet the last part is obviously the approach and the landing. And what's really, really nice about the NXi now with these latest updates is we can choose an approach called a visual approach. Just to boil it down, basically it'll just let us line up with any runway, and it'll put in a couple waypoints, so it'll get us lined up with that runway to make landing a lot easier for us. And so what we can do is we can get to those approaches by hitting this button here called procedure. Now, if you don't want to deal with this at all, you can still fly to the airport. Manually, you can do the traffic pattern, just do a visual approach like yourself, not this Garmin defined visual approach in the database. Just do it normally, like fly in close to the airport, make a few left-hand turns and slow down, put your flaps down and land. That stuff is covered in the basic tutorials, so it does take getting used to. I wouldn't say I'm superb at even flying a traffic pattern myself yet. You know, I focus a lot on the avionics stuff and doing the procedures, but I think that the visual approaches are really helpful. So anyway, if you do want to try the visual approach with the NXi at any runway at any airport, you can just hit this procedure button down here. So it just says proc. And if you hit that and then choose select approach, now this will be based off your destination airport. So this has to be in your flight plan. You have to have that destination airport. You hit select approach by hitting enter. And now here in this list, there are a bunch of more advanced approach types like an ILS and these more advanced ones, an RNAV approach. But what we're gonna do is you'll also see all of these visual approaches listed for every single airport. And what you can do is just choose which runway you want to land at. So in this case, I believe it recommended runway 25. So here we can choose the visual for runway 25. You can choose any runway you want. Ideally, we're landing into the wind. We're landing based on the weather. What we could do is we could wait until we look up the weather. I'm just going to set it up in advance before we get in range to check the weather at the airport. But anyway, say we want to land it at 25. I can just choose the visual for 25 and hit enter again. And then you don't have to worry about the minimums for now. I'm trying to keep this simple. Then we use this outer knob down here on this FMS dial. So right down here in this FMS knob, we turn this outer knob to move this highlighted area. we just move that all the way down here to activate. And I'm going to choose activate because we just want to fly to this straight away. We just want to start flying to these points right away to get lined up. So I'm going to use activate. And as soon as I hit enter, it's going to respond to that. The autopilot will respond to that. Okay, air traffic control is talking to us again, but our co-pilot's going to take care of it. And it gives us a warning here that basically says, hey, warning, you know, you have to watch out for obstacles yourself. So I'm going to, again, hit enter. Oh, Josh is saying, ATIS says runway 7. Okay, I can respond to that. So I haven't checked myself. He says runway 7. So we can change that. I'll go up here with the outer knob, then use the inner knob, and then I'll choose runway 7 instead. So again, I'm not going to do the other procedures. These are a little more advanced. We're just going to do the visual one to help us get lined up. So visual 07, and then scroll back down and hit activate. And then I'll just hit activate, hit enter again to just say okay to this warning. All right, and now I'm going to hit flight plan right here to get rid of it. So now what it's done is, if I zoom in on this a little bit, you can see that it's actually got a couple waypoints here for us. So TOD, this actually means top of descent. This is if we use something called VNAV to do our descent for us. Not going to worry about that right now. But you can see what it's doing is it's flying us around to the west side of the airport and then making a right-hand turn to line us up with runway 07. So remember, like I said at the beginning of the stream, the runway number corresponds to the rough heading of the runway. So 07 means that runway 07 means that we'll be roughly on a 070 heading to be aligned with that runway. So because 070, that's more towards the east. It's a little north of east, so right around here. So you can see that we'll be making a long right-hand turn, almost a U-turn completely, to be facing at that runway. So what's nice about this, though, is that it's basically putting these points in for us automatically. It put in a point called straight, and once we turn at that point, we'll be lined up for a straight in on that runway. So using that visual approach is a really easy way, and it's really convenient because it's going to be there for every runway at every airport in the sim. So I recommend using that. It's a great way to just get help using the autopilot and lining up for that runway. You know, if you want to get to the point where you're doing the traffic pattern, you know, and flying it yourself, you can totally do that. But I really am a fan of this just because it's another thing we can use to make it a little bit easier for us to get to the airport that we want to land at and to get to the runway we want to land at. It's giving me low fuel again. Something else you can do if you're running into fuel things during a flight, it's funny, but you can go ahead and just top off your fuel tanks at any time in your flight just by going up to the fuel menu up here and just changing this fuel slider. So you can just gas up your tanks in mid-flight like this. So, you know, if you realize that you forgot to do it at the main menu, you can always do it, or, you know, when you're on the ground, you can always do it in mid-flight to make your life easier. All right, so the next thing we need to do is descend. And now this is another thing that can be tricky, right? Every airport, the altitude, or the elevation of the airport is different, mattering which airport you're flying to. So it can always be tricky to figure out what altitude to be at. What's nice about the NXi and its capabilities is it'll calculate what altitude we should be at a certain waypoint. So if we look at the flight plan here, it's telling us that by the time we get to this waypoint here, we want to be down to 370 feet. This is a little more advanced. Like generally I would say use vertical speed mode to get down to like pattern altitude, and then just do it visually from there. This one kind of cuts it in kind of tight since we're kind of making a U-turn. If you want to go for like extra credit and do something a little more advanced, I guess, you could use another mode here, which is called VNAV mode. And this is another vertical mode we can use. And what I can do is, instead of using vertical speed mode, I can hit VNAV mode. And what that'll do is it'll calculate the descent for us automatically. It'll show us what our vertical speed should be at any moment. So right here, these little magenta arrows are showing me that I should be descending already to get down to that altitude. It's a little more advanced. I don't think we should really do it now. We're just going to use vertical speed mode. So what I'm going to do is 370 is shown here. I know the Santa Barbara airport is around sea level, so I know our pattern altitude would be around 1,000 feet. But you could use this as a guideline still for what altitude you'll need to be at when we get to that waypoint. But it is pretty low because this is right before we get down to the runway. You know, it's only 2.5 miles from the runway. But anyway, what I'm going to do is just start our descent. So we're going to use Autopilot again. Remember, when you change your altitude using Autopilot, the first thing you want to do is use the altitude knob to set your target altitude. So here I'm setting it at 1,000. And then I'm going to use vertical speed mode. So I hit VS. And then we use nose down to dial in that vertical speed that we want to go down at. So I'm going to hit this down. And I'm actually going to descend faster because I'm doing it late. You can see the airport right there. So we actually need to descend pretty fast because I've just been slacking. We should have started our descent earlier. And I'm pulling our power back too. But what we're going to do is we're doing our descent, but remember the GPS, or sorry, the Autopilot is going to do the turns for us. It's going to turn us kind of tight, actually. We're going to, once we get down to this, we're going to make this pretty sharp right-hand turn to line us up with the runway. So what I'm doing is pulling my power out. I've set our descent at a faster rate of descent than we would normally do. You normally want to do something like 500 feet per minute and start it well in advance. So I'm doing 1,000 feet per minute, just this faster rate of descent just to get us down in time. Actually, you can see the runways right over there. That's the airport right over there. And the runway we're going to land on is basically here. We're going to be coming in from this direction. We're going to be making a right-hand turn. Yeah, this is also kind of a just a sharp turn to take, you know, from the direction we're coming in. Something we could do if we wanted is switch back to heading mode and fly a little more towards the west, fly out this direction, and then turn on that visual approach through the procedure menu and have it calculate it from there instead. So what I could do though is I could try to do it myself, like try to do this turn in, kind of a hard turn, but yeah, it'll be fine. So I'm just pulling my throttle way back because I just want to go slow to give myself some time. And because we're still descending, you can see that, you know, our airspeed is not within flap range yet. So over here on the airspeed strip, there's a little white bar that comes in, and the white range here in the airspeed shows us when we can use our flaps. And in the case of the Diamond here, it actually tells us over here, also written out here, it says that the first notch of flap can be used at 110 knots or below. And then the landing notch, that second notch, can be used at 98 knots or below. KSNA is a great airport to practice. Oh, pattern flying. Awesome. Yeah, that's John Wayne, right? KSNA. The LA airspace is also just crazy. Crazy because of just how many airports there are in that area. All right, so we can see the runway right over here. And what I'm going to do, it's kind of cheating, but just really quickly, I'm going to press B on my keyboard again. Remember, that's to set the altimeter, so I'm just making sure our altitude is accurate here. What we could do, again, I'm rushing this a little bit just because we took off again, and you know I've been chatting with you guys. But what we could do at this point is dial in, tune into the ATIS for the airport we're going to. So here I can choose Santa Barbara, and here I have Santa Barbara ATIS, so we could listen to which runways are active based on the weather. But thankfully, Josh in chat told us that the ATIS said runway 7, so we've got that dialed in already for runway 7. And the co-pilot's taking care of our landing clearance, or our landing permission already, so we're in good hands in our co-pilot because we turned on that the co-pilot ATC communication, and we did that up in this menu up here. There's this little assistance menu, and we turned on AI radio communication just to make our life easier, so our co-pilot's doing that. All right, so we leveled off. I'm putting more throttle in now, so you can see our airspeed's getting low. We just want to make sure we're not in that red range down there. So around 60 knots, that's where it's in the red, which is where we're going to stall. So we just want to make sure that we're moving fast enough to not be in that red range. And we've leveled off here at 1,000 feet. So we can see the airport over there. And because I chose that visual approach, it's going to take us out this direction and then do that right-hand turn for us. Oh, 2.5 according to ATC? Oh no. We're not landing on the right runway then. So I'm going to keep it going just for the sake of this stream and not to switch around on us. But yeah, this is not going to be the ideal runway to land at then. All right, so we're at 1,000 feet. There's the runway over there. And we're already within flap range, so if I want to, especially if I want to go slower, I want to increase the drag, right, on our plane, I can put the first notch of flaps in. I could actually put in both notches right now. So I will put in the first notch before we make our turn, just so we have fewer things to do. Every time we put a notch in, we're going to have to increase our speed to compensate for that increased drag on the plane. So I'm going to put in the first notch of the flaps here. We're at 91. We can put this in as long as we're below 110 on this plane. And now to compensate, because this is going to increase our drag on the plane, more air hitting the surfaces, you know, hitting the flaps, I'm going to have to put in just a little more throttle. All right, and now we're starting that turn. I should be descending now as well. So at this point, because of how we're coming in on this, I'm going to take over manually now. We can see the runway right over there. So I'm going to disconnect the autopilot and not let it finish these turns for us just because it's such a tight turn in this scenario. And I'm pulling the throttle because we're a bit high as well. And then I'm going to put in our next notch of flaps in a second here once we turn in. All right, so I'm going to pull the nose up to slow us down a little bit. Remember, the biggest thing to remember when you're coming in for a landing is, and actually I'm a little bit too high already because I've just been getting distracted. The most important thing is when you're coming in on a landing is to remember that it's a little counterintuitive, but pitching up and down is to determine your airspeed. And putting power in and out is how you control your rate of climb or descent. So if you want to go down faster, you pull power out. If you want to go faster, you point the nose down. So I'm just watching, sorry, this is a little rushed here because of that tight turn. So now if I'm descending too fast, I need to put in more power. So remember, you pitch for speed and use throttle to control your rate of descent or climb. So if I want to drop more, I need to pull the throttle out. If I want to slow down, I need to pull the nose up. So I'm going down too fast, I need to put in more throttle. So that's how you control it when you're coming in for a landing. Remember, throttle for your altitude, not pitching the nose for your altitude. Now, once we cross the threshold, I'm just going to pull the throttle out. Should have pulled that out already. And then you just pull the nose up as you sink down onto the runway. Keep pulling the nose up, and we're going to basically stall as we come down here. I'm still holding the nose up, and now I'm letting it down softly. I should do another couple of those just so I can explain it a few more times. So I'm actually going to take off again. So we're basically doing what's called a touch and go, because I know that was pretty rushed. So let's do it again. I think we have enough runway here. This is a little sketchy. So I put the flaps up, and we're just going to take off again.
Clear the runway.
And ATC's yelling at us because they're telling us to get off the runway. All right, so I'm just going to take off again. We're going to do another. We're going to circle around again because I just want to explain this a couple more times because it was a little rushed. So we're at full power and we're climbing again. And I'm just going to assume that the traffic pattern is left here, so we're going to do our left-hand turns.
Diamond November 21 Kilo India Papa Santa Barbara Tower.
Okay, and our flaps are up. Sorry, I put them up a little too soon. We'd actually take off with one notch of flaps in this plane.
Diamond Kilo India Papa wind 217 at 5.
Okay, so I'm going to just do like the traffic pattern that you may have done in the tutorials. So let's just assume for now, I didn't check the elevation, but let's assume that Santa Barbara's at sea level, so it's at 0. So we're at 700 feet right now, so it's a good time to start our left-hand turn. And we're going to try to keep our altitude at 1,000 feet. And our ATC is being handled by our co-pilot there, because I turned on the option. All right, so we're at 1,000 feet, so I'm pulling the nose down. Just gonna keep this turn going around. Okay.
Diamond Kilo India Papa ATC services.
So now we're at 90 degrees.
Good day.
Now we're gonna make, sorry, I'm actually too high again here. Make another left-hand turn. So I'm just gonna go all the way around again. We're gonna do the traffic pattern around doing left-hand turns. I'm gonna be at about 1,000 feet. I didn't check the elevation. When I landed, I should have checked the elevation so we would know that we wanna be about 1,000 feet above the ground. So I'm gonna need to get a little bit lower here. All right, so I'm a little high here. So I want to come in for the landing again just to talk about pitch versus power when you're coming in for the landing. And this is still something I have to remind myself of every time I'm coming in on a landing. Because it seems a little counterintuitive. Like most of the time, especially if you're new, what you'll think is 1,000 AGL, yes. Oh, did I say sea level? Yeah, so traffic pattern altitude, generally it's 1,000 feet AGL, so above the ground. This airport happens to be around sea level at Santa Barbara, but I didn't look it up. But yeah, rough. You want to be at 1,000 AGL, but you know, I'm just kind of doing this off the cuff just to show you guys another approach here, or another landing. So what I was trying to say was that it's a little counterintuitive because generally people think, oh, I want to go down, I point the nose down, but it's not just pointing the nose down. I mean, actually, when you're coming in from a landing, you're going to have your nose up very slightly, like especially when you come into the bottom, you're going to be level or up. You're not necessarily going to be pointing all the way down. Like you point down to get a visual so you can see the runway, but your altitude, you're not going to be managing your altitude and your rate of descent by pointing the nose up and down. You're going to do that by using your throttle instead. Because remember, the lift, the amount of wind passing over our wings, generating lift, you know, that can happen by pitching the nose down and descending. That increases the airflow over our wings, right? So does increasing our throttle to go faster. So it's all about the kind of total effect of how much lift we have, how much air is passing over our wings. So when we're coming in for the landing, we will descend faster by just pulling out some of our power. And if we want to slow our rate of descent, we will add power. So I'm going to make a turn here in a second, but what we do is they say pitch for speed and use your throttle for altitude. So when you're coming in for a landing, what we want to do is get to the speed we want to be at by pitching the nose up and down. And we want to control our rate of descent by adding and removing throttle. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make our turn. We're going to be pretty far out from the airport at this point. We're at 700 feet, so I'm adding a little bit of throttle because I'm too low. So it's a little, I need to practice talking to chat at the same time a bit more as I'm doing all this as well. All right, so I'm adding power now just because we're a little bit too low. So again, when you're too low, you're going to want to add power. When you're too high, you're going to want to remove power. When you're too fast, you want to pitch the nose up. When you're too slow, you want to pitch the nose down. So in this plane, I'm basically, I'm roughly want to be at about 80 knots during the approach. All right, so we're going to turn to line up to the runway. Now, just visually, I can tell that I'm okay. I'm not really too high or too low, so I'm not worried about my throttle. My speed is too high, though. My speed's 100. So what I need to do is pull the nose up to bleed some of that speed off. So I'm pulling up to get slower. And because that's going to make us go higher, I need to pull throttle out to kind of balance it out. So now I'm too high, right? My speed is decent. I'm at 80, 85, but I'm too high. So I use my throttle to pull my throttle out for my altitude. So throttle for the altitude, pitch for the speed. So my speed is good, but I need to drop more. So I'm pulling more and more throttle out. And you can see that we're going to be down here. You can see the rate of descent. So we're dropping faster. Now my speed's around 80, that's where I want it. If I needed to slow down even more, say I want to slow down a little bit more, I pull back on the stick more. So remember, the key is throttle for your altitude when you're coming into land and pitching for the speed. So if you want to descend faster, you pull the throttle. And I also forgot my flaps since I've been talking this whole time. Sorry, this is a little sketchy. I'm not doing this perfectly. So I'm putting in my flaps now because I forgot to. But yeah, the key is throttle for your rate of descent. Now I need to pitch down more because I'm a little bit too slow. So I need to pitch down to increase my speed a little. And I'm still pulling my throttle pretty far out because I need to descend faster. Now when I get down towards the runway, you start flaring, pulling the nose up, and that'll, you know, ideally we're basically stalling the plane for that final little bit of touchdown. So I used a little bit of rudder there. So I'm gonna do one more just so I can, I even need the practice. So now what I'm gonna do is put my flaps up. I forgot the flaps that time while I was talking. In this plane, I'm gonna leave one notch of flaps and then go back to full power. And then we're gonna take off again once we get to our rotation speed, which is 70. So there's 70, so I can pull up again. All right, so let's try this again. So yeah, this is just one of the yeah, it's hard to talk and remember everything. Yeah, I'm trying to do everything at once and keep an eye on chat, so sorry guys. All right, so now we're climbing again. So and ATC is just being handled by the autopilot again, or by the AI co-pilot.
Diamond November 21 Kilo India Papa Santa Barbara Tower. Altimeter 29.999 wind 2.
All right, so we're gonna climb up. Let's just assume that that the airport's at 0 feet, and so we'll just go up to 1,000. All right, so we're at 600 feet. Here's 700. So that's 700 is like a good time to start your left-hand turn.
Clear to land runway 25 Diamond Kilo India Papa.
And I'm gonna remember to put my flaps up again. So in the Diamond, there's just like some extra steps because we take off with one notch of flaps. So when you take off, once you're at a safe altitude, you put that first notch, of flaps up. Okay, we turn once, and then we're gonna make our left-hand turn here. And I'm too high again. I have a tendency to be a little bit too high a lot of the time. Something I need to work on. And if you have a button bound to the smart camera, I think it's set by default. But I actually find the smart camera really helpful because when you're near an airport like this, what you can do is click the smart camera button to look right at the airport like this. So it'll look at the airport. And I'm way too high, so putting my nose down a bit to just level, and then I'm pulling throttle to make sure that we're descending. And yeah, the Diamond, I'm used to doing the Cessna a lot. I mostly fly the 172. You can cut that in pretty tight, but the Diamond, because like the wingspan is like a foot longer on each side, like each wing is a foot longer, I believe, than the 172. It's like more glider-like, so like I need more space to make these turns. Something else you can do when you're doing this is to set your heading bug that we use for our autopilot just as a reference for the runway you're landing at. So I could turn this heading bug around to like 070 since I'm running it. I'm landing at runway 07. So you can set the heading to 070, and that'll give us a little reference point for where the runway is. So if I want to be parallel with it, I'm going to turn left now, so that little bug, a little blue icon there, that symbol for our heading bug, is at the bottom. So now I know I'm roughly in line with the runway. All right, so we're at 1500, so once again, I'm too high. This is a problem that I just have all the time. I'm just always too high. So I'm gonna get out a little bit further. I'm gonna get out over here over the water first before I make the turn in, just to give myself a little more time to set up. And also what I should be doing is now with the flaps, what I'll be doing is putting the first notch of flaps down before I make my turn to final. And then once I'm on final, then I'll put the second notch of flaps in once I get closer. Yeah, so nap time just said turning left base for short final, add first set of flaps. Yeah, so I could put the flaps in before I even start the first turn. All right, so we're at 1,300 feet at 100 knots. Trying to hold that altitude here. And our first notch of flaps in this is usable at 110 knots or below. So right here, I could flip my first notch of flaps in first. And then because every time you put flaps in, you know, it's going to increase the drag on the plane. So we're going to have to compensate with, you know, our pitch to compensate for that and maybe some power. And now I'll make my left-hand turn. This is something I should really do off stream. You guys are just watching me practice here. But the main thing I just wanted to stress is like when you're coming in, and it was really counterintuitive for me the first time I learned it, and that was the whole pitch for speed and power for altitude thing when you're coming in for the landing. To focus on those really helped me get a little bit better at landings. I have a lot of work to do still, but it definitely helped out. All right, so now we turn base. So we just have one more turn for final. And we can see the lights out there for the runway. And I should be descending, so there we go. And I'm just using the left, I'm just using the hat on my joystick to turn to look to the left. But if you have the smart camera button bound, you hit that button, it looks right towards the airport. So that's really helpful. Like even during the turn like this, I'm just holding that button. So it really helps lining up. Okay, now we're at 104 knots still. So remember, pitch for speed. So I need to slow down. So I'm going to pull the nose of the plane up because I need to get within that flap range. And I'm pulling my throttle out a little bit too because putting the nose up is going to make us climb momentarily. All right, now I'm in range for my second notch, so I'm just going to put it in now. You can wait until a little later. I like to put it in pretty early just to reduce how many things I'm thinking about. Now our speed is at 80, so I want to hold the speed, and you can see we're kind of dropping too fast, right? So remember, it's throttle for the altitude. Everything altitude related while we're coming in like this, throttle. So my right hand, I'm just thinking about my right hand as almost like, do I want to go higher or lower? If I push my right hand up and increase the throttle, I'm going to go higher, or, you know, I'm going to slow our descent. So my left hand, I'm almost thinking of it this way too. The airspeed is on the left and the throttle is on the right, or sorry, the altitude is on the right. My left hand is on my stick or yoke, my right hand is on my throttle. So the left one is for the speed, the right one is for the altitude. So it's mapped like that for me visually. So I feel a little too low, so I'm adding more throttle in. But I'm keeping my speed where it is. My pitch isn't changing. I can see the runway. My speed is good at 80 knots here. So yeah, the altitude is my right hand, so I'm just keeping that in mind. So I'm adding a little tiny bit more throttle slowly just because I feel like I'm a little bit too low. I'm just staring at the end of the runway basically. So I'm starting to pull my throttle a little bit now because I feel like I'm a little high. Pulling it even more because I feel like I'm way too high now. And keeping my eye on my airspeed and pointing the nose towards the two blocks there on the runway, that aiming point. All right, we're still good on 8. We're still good at 82. Watching the end of the runway. Our rated descent looks good, so I'm leaving the throttle alone. I'm about to pull it to idle as we cross over the threshold here. So now it's at idle. And now I'm just pulling the nose up slowly to bleed off that speed. And we're going to come into a stall basically. Just keep pulling the nose up, keep pulling the nose up. Still pulling the nose up. I'm using a little bit of rudder because I'm a little off center line. We already touched down. And I'm just really slowly letting the nose go. Yeah, I have a lot of practice to do. Anyway, I know that was a little repetitive, but I'm going to hit brakes now and actually stop this time. I know that was a little repetitive, but I just want to stress that about landing. Like, it was so intimidating for me. It still is. But if you keep in mind that, you know, you pitch for speed and use your throttle to control your descent, that mapping of your left hand for the speed here and the right hand for the altitude, just like it's laid out here on the G1000. This is my left hand, which is the speed side. This is my right hand, which is the altitude side. That helps me, so hopefully that helps other people too.
121.7 for Diamond Kilo India Papa.
All right, so now that we've landed, I should probably cover what to do after you land. So I'm just gonna stop here at these bars. So when you clear the runway, you pass these bars right here. I actually can't use my mouse cursor for some reason. So the bars we just passed there, those yellow lines, the double solid and the double dotted, that's where you clear the runway. You want the entire airplane to be past those bars. And then you stop. And this is the point where we contact the ground controller to get permission to go to parking. So I'll go to the ground controller on my ATC menu. Again, up here, you get it to that with the ATC button up here, or you can set a shortcut for it. I actually have mine on my mouse as one of my side buttons on my mouse. So then here we can request, now that we're with the ground controller, we can say we want to go to gates or we want to go to parking. So in this case, we go to parking.
Santa Barbara ground, Diamond, November,
And just like when we took off
21
originally
India,
earlier in the
Papa
stream, they're going to give us taxi instructions. And because we turned on the taxi ribbon, it'll draw that path for us on the ground, show us exactly how to get there. So you see how complicated these are. 33 left, hotel, cross runway 33 right, hotel, Bravo, Charlie. Some of these instructions are unrealistic in the sim. They're a little verbose. But in any case, we'll get the taxi ribbon drawn on the ground for us here. So at this point, if you're flying a plane that has an after landing checklist, you could bring this up and go through it. Most of the time it's to do things like put your flaps back up, to change your lights. So in this case, we would turn our landing and our position lights off, turn our taxi lights on. And then what we can do is take our parking brake back off and then just follow the taxi ribbon over to parking again. And I know that another thing people ask about a lot is like, how do you end the flight? Well, this is very helpful in ending the flight because it's going to show us a legit parking space to go to. Generally, you can just park near any planes that are on the ground. They'll be in the legit parking spots to make sure that you're in like an area that will count as parking in the sim. They gave us permission to cross all the runways, so we're just going to cross them. Technically, we would turn our landing lights on when we're crossing the runways, but in this case, we're just going to blaze through it, go through the runways here. We can check left and right if we want to be super careful. So yeah, we just follow the taxi ribbon over to our parking spot. And then once we get to the parking spot and stop, all we have to do to end the flight as far as Microsoft Flight Sim is concerned is turn off the engines and turn off the electronics, basically turn off the avionics. And then it'll bring up our logbook screen and tell us that we got credit for the flight. It's like there's an F-22 flying around in the mountains over there, probably coming our way. Have I ever flown on Pilot Edge? Yeah, I have actually. Last year, I flew on Pilot Edge for a couple months. And I did their CAT program, which is like their communication, what's it called? The communication and training program or something, which is like the basics of ATC comms. And I loved it. They're really professional there, but they're strict at the same time, which is really good for learning for me. It was worth the money. I know it's between like $20 and $40 a month, US dollars. But I think it's a good way to learn because they, they make really thorough tutorials. For every one of the tutorials you'll do with them, like through their rating programs, they have a whole transcript. They have everything written out that you can read and learn about for the flight you're going to do. And then they also have a video of one of the Pilot Edge guys flying it himself. And they give you a transcript that you can use as a cheat sheet for when you're talking to them. So it's really, really well put together. So yeah, I had a really good time doing the CAT ones. I think I did up to CAT 9 before I stopped. I didn't finish the CAT program, but I do want to go back to it. I really should get back to it and do the instrument stuff. So after you do the basics program, they have instrument as well. So you can practice ILSs and ILS approaches and all that IFR stuff that we talk about on my channel a bunch. All right, so here's our highlighted parking spot. So all we have to do is just get our plane in here. It'll turn yellow and then we can stop. And if you want, you can follow the usher guy here or woman and follow their instructions to go left or go right. And when their arms come together, that's when you stop. Whoops, braked a little asymmetrically there. Anyway, it looks like we got some stunts happening over here. Oh, I don't have the F-22, so he looks like an Airbus. So I just set my parking brake now. And then all you have to do to get credit now that we're in a legit parking spot is just turn off the engine and turn off the avionics. So there are real procedures for doing this, but at the least, all you really have to do is turn off, like in the Diamond, turn off the electric master right here. And then turn off the engine master, which is over here under this switch. So as long as you turn both of those off, that'll bring up this final screen right here to tell you all your stats, you know, where we started, where we flew to, how long it was. We get our takeoffs and landings, just like, you know, in a logbook. So we got 3 landings because I did those go arounds, and we got our 1 takeoff. Unfortunately, I don't know if they fixed this, but I don't know if it gives you credit for partial flights or not anymore. I thought they were supposed to fix that. Who knows? But yeah, that's how you get credit for that. And then, yeah, you could also, mattering which plane you're in, you could bring up the checklists again. The 172 has a lot of checklists. The Diamond doesn't have as many, but it'll have like a parking, a shutdown, all the checklists if you want to go through those in detail. Yeah, so we made it to Santa Barbara. It took a while longer because I had to restart the flight, so sorry about that little hiccup with the sim crashing. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I wanted to try something different today on the stream instead of just doing more Sky Park stuff. But just wanted to see how this would go and if this is helpful for people. And yeah, that's it. I know you guys that have been flying a lot probably don't find this super useful, but for any beginners out there, I hope that it gave you a few tips. And you know, the stream replay will be saved, so you can always go back and watch the parts that I did over and over again if they're helpful to you to learn. Yeah, so just wanted to do some more of a basics video here. All right, so I hope that helped. And yeah, I'm gonna end the stream here. It's been almost 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. I really appreciate you guys hanging out. It's always fun when I can chat with you guys. Here we have some acrobatics going on over here. Maybe we don't. It says he's in an F-22, but I do not have the F-22, so we just see the, is that the Airbus? I don't know if that's a 320 or something else, but, and I know a few of you guys were following along before I crashed, so thanks for flying along. Sorry I didn't pay too much attention to you guys and do formation flying this time, but you can save that for Sunday. Maybe Sunday we'll do like more of a just formation, like scenic flying or something like that. Anyway, I'm gonna call it a night, go get some dinner, and probably play some more New Worlds because I've been addicted to that game. Do I have a Discord? Yeah, the Discord is linked in the description below. So if you go to the video description, yeah, we'd love to have you. There's 100 and something of us in there at this point. We chat here and there, so yeah, feel free to join if you want to hang out. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, again, and Jake, thanks for the info on the Diamond. I didn't realize I was doing the fuel transfer completely wrong. New World server. We're on the US West on the ferry server. A bunch of my old friends are playing. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna play. I like cranked out level 60 the last 2 weeks, but it's really taking me away from flying in the sim, so I need to get back on here. Okay, Naptown, thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the Discord. And yeah, Jake, thanks again for explaining the Diamond. I swear every time I do these streams, like I'm trying to teach some of the stuff I know about, and then I end up learning something from you guys, so I really appreciate that. I learn something every stream myself. I learn something every time there's a video I post that there's YouTube comments on, so we're all learning together. And yeah, I know the things I know and don't know a lot of the things that I still need to learn, like the fuel transfer switch right here. So yeah, I always appreciate it. So thanks for helping me out as well. All right, good night, guys. And yeah, I'll see you in the next stream. Have a good night or a good day. Have fun flying, and take care. Thanks for hanging out.